Welcome everybody to the second ever OCC Ultimate. Players have been vying for the chance to qualify for this for the past 3 months. They have made it here to this 2-day extravaganza, vying for a $3,000 prize pool, and we are here to call all of the action. I am your host, Christo. I am joined by Spooz and by Bubbles. We've got Starry and Berto waiting in the wings to cast the rest of the matchups here today. We're going to take you through our quarterfinals over the span of Saturday, and Sunday is going to be time for the semis, the bronze, and the grand finals. So let's take a quick look in who is participating before we get into the action. There you have the bracket. J King, who did qualify first for this ultimate, is going to be taking on Baron von Glower in our first matchup here. We're going to have Head versus Tang Tang in our second quarterfinal. Unfortunately, Ziyang was unable to submit their deck list in time, so they have been disqualified from this matchup, and Azzy will be our first semi-finalist. And finally today, we will be seeing Vinny take on No in 5. So some big names here today going head to head. And now, Spooz, you missed the last clash, which was the first opportunity to kind of see the Brothers in Arms cards in action, a little bit of a change up of the meta. Anything specific you're looking forward to here, being the first time you're casting matchups with kind of some of these new deck lists and new setups?
Yeah, I mean, the difference between the Clash and the Ultimate is that players have to bring 4 decks, right? So we see an even wider variety of new decks here. I think out of 28 decks the players are bringing today, we have 16 different archetypes. And yeah, if we just remember the past months where we just had, I don't know, 5, 6 different archetypes of all of the players combined. So definitely looking forward to see something new here today, see the new cards in action, how they interact with each other. And yeah, that's what I'm looking forward the most here today.
Bubbles, the wide variety of archetypes, is that because people just haven't quite figured out the meta yet? We're still early on, people are experimenting, trying to figure out what's best? Or do you think that, there is just more possibility right now based on the new cards, based on the reserve pool?
I imagine it's a sort of mix of things. We find it whenever a new expansion comes out, people try and push the limits and see what they can play, and we certainly see more creative decks come out. I remember in recent in older expansions, recently after they came out, one of the decks which became more popular was Ramp, or even USA named Ramp. This was something, especially when Man Ostrom came out, this became more popular as it was able to just overpower the slower decks that people were testing out. And we have seen ASW Patrol actually make quite a performance compared to what people were expecting. This is something we all looked at and shrugged it off. 7 credits to Ramp, that's way too expensive, but it seemed to be doing some work for itself. So it's going to be interesting as people try out new things. A lot of the newer things people try out are generally more sort of mid-range and control decks, and aggro decks instead, they try and take their old shell and just evolve it to what's now available. You generally, this is my stack of cards I had before. What can I put in to make up for what I've lost? I find it more rare for new aggro decks to come into the light. So I think the mid-range to control decks are going to be where people are expressing more creativity. And I do think these players are going to be aware of that and trying to counter it by saying, if you're going to bring a mid-range or control deck, I'm going to have something which can just overpower that and beat down on it.
Absolutely. So why don't we go ahead and start seeing how some of this stuff is going to interact by getting into our first matchup here of J King versus Baron von Glower. We're going to go ahead and dive into the player cards. Let's start with J King, since we've seen J King once or twice here. Now these are lifetime stats, 24,000 matches, a lifetime win rate of 70%. Spooz, is there anything left to say about J King other than no surprise, he's here and he is qualified first?
I mean, it's just a clear sign that he also just qualified as first over the 3 months periods of the Clash, where you just collect points for each of your results in an OCC Clash, and J King just on top of that as well, just as we are kind of used to it. So honestly, this season I just tried to grind a little bit in the ladder just for half a day, I guess, and I've just realized how exhausting it can be. So everybody who's just experienced this just has way more, like, I don't know, is way more impressed what J King is doing over years now by always being on top of the ladder, always know what the best decks are. So I really just put my head, or how do you say it in English? Um, it's really impressive what J King is doing over the past years, and I think, yeah, if he's just staying in the game, he will always be a person to just fight with for the first spot, I guess.
And Berto in our production chat is just letting us know that the favorite card should have been changed to Gambit. We talked a little bit about it during the clash. It was less than impressive, so we'll just move on from here. But why don't we break down J King's decks while we're looking at what he's bringing to the table here? Spooz, how do you feel about continuing on here and walking us through the J King's lineup of 4 decks? Of course, one will be banned. We will have a best of 5 here between J King and Baron.
Yeah, sure. So the first deck actually is something that we are kind of familiar with. It is the US German frontline deck, but it has 2 new cards from the Brothers in Arms expansion. And it has, first of all, the 327 Pathfinders. 3 credits. On deploy, you can deal damage to a unit, and when you kill it, this unit becomes veteran. And then on the start of your turn, it just bounces another unit, which is quite strong. It's a really good unit just perfectly fits into this deck. And then we have the P51B. That is an interesting tech choice, and I'm excited to see how it works out. I haven't seen it in leather yet. I think it's more of a slow card, but it actually has a purpose in this deck, and yeah, I'm excited to see if it works well. But overall, this is just the standard US German frontline list we are used to, and yeah, something familiar here. Second deck, on the other hand, is something, I don't like to see that much. Also, the third deck, they're kind of doing the same thing, but with different nations. They're both control decks with a lot of discard in them. They have the Case Yellow, they have Wolfpack, Annihilation. On the German side, you have Maelstrom, which is a very strong removal tool that Germany has access to now. And yeah, I think the German variant, that's kind of the version that is played a lot of ladder these days, and I think one of the favorite decks that is J King playing at the moment. It has really, really good tools to just deal with stuff of your opponent. It has AoE in it, it has guards in it, it has healing in it. Island Defense, a very, very dominant card in the current meta, and both the Japanese deck and the German deck are having 3 copies of this in the deck. So yeah, a really annoying deck. Not just guarding up, pinning your opponent's stuff, also just make your opponent discard is really annoying sometimes for the opponent. And yeah, those are kind of the win conditions with this deck. And then, third deck, just another very familiar deck here, and I think one of the most broad decks that are brought here today. It is Soviet Japan Self-Damage, a deck that is playing cards like the 34th Guards and the 456 Rifle Regiment that are just benefiting from dealing damage to your HQ with your own cards. The 456 are just becoming greater whenever they are on board and you play a self-discard order, and 34th Guard are just getting reduced in cost. So at some point early in the game, turn 4, we've seen turn 4 where there have been 3/6/6 bodies on board from the 34th Guards. Can be quite impressive, but players are used to it. Like if you play against this deck, you can also just hold back units, so your opponent is not having targets to play the self-damage cards on. But yeah, good to see something new, good to see something old, and yeah, that's J King's lineup.
Right on. Thank you, Spooz. J King bringing that mix of familiar and something new. We'll have to see how it plays out. Let's take a dive onto the other side of this matchup and take a look at Baron's player card here. 19,000 matches, so a couple thousand less than J King. 60% win rate, which is still nothing to shake a stick at. Finishing 8th in the qualifier, thanks to a phenomenal performance in this month's OCC Clash. Actually, kind of snuck Baron in. Bubbles, what do we know about Baron von Glower?
So Baron is, as far as I'm concerned, one of the most creative players there are in cards. He sort of plays the most off-meta, offbeat decks you've ever seen. I've seen him play things where he tries to use the Wildebeest along with a bunch of 1/1 light infantry to try and blitz out an OTK on his opponent, and we see that in his favorite card, Siberian Transfer, which Baron sort of developed and built this Siberian Transfer OTK deck, which sadly isn't really available at the moment because of the rotation of Ura, but it may come back at some point in the future. But it's just impressive to me that someone who plays such creative decks and sort of offbeat decks is still able to hit a 61% win rate. It's quite impressive when you play one of Baron's creative decks and you struggle to win a single game, and then you watch him and he's just demolishing his opponents over and over
Mm.
again. He's a big fan of stuff like Pin, where you don't really kill your units, you just hold them for as long as possible before winning the game for like a Commonwealth or something like this, just to blow out the game. I know as well he sort of reaches out to quite a diverse group of people in the community. A lot of people that maybe most mainstream cards players aren't familiar with, just because he runs into them on ladder, he sees them playing an interesting deck, and he's like, I need to learn this. I need to expand my collection, if you will. So that's sort of my main description of Baron. He is, as far as I'm concerned, the most creative player in this OCC.
And I want to echo that. I love seeing players like Baron make it to the ultimate because it's somebody who's just had such a phenomenal impact on the community for so long that it's awesome seeing him participate at this high level. And like you said, Bubbles, especially somebody who is creative and brings different things to the table. While we're talking about those deck lists, why don't we go ahead and bring up what Baron is packing today? And Bubbles, you can walk us through what exactly we should expect here.
So we do have on the left two more traditional decks. We've got Jagro, and this is sort of returned to what it was before Feigned Retreat came out. You try and use things like 22nd, the Marder, and Enigma to draw cards. You also have these expansions. You take the front line early. You just draw a lot of cards consistently by holding the front line. It is more weak, sorry, to things like AoE and blowouts on the board because you're not able to get your expansions off if you don't have the front line. And if you don't have units to trade away, you can't use your Martyr 3 to draw cards, for example. So it can be a little bit more difficult. If you lose the front line against any sort of mid-range deck, it can be really, really difficult to win from that position. But you do have cards like Shinano to try and clear the board. When we saw Desperate Measures rotated out, a lot of people thought, where's this going for Japan? But Shinano has just sort of filled that slot really, really nicely. And it can also additionally offer more burn to face. If you have a lot of units on board, you can play this and get 6 or 7 face damage just for free credit. So it can be really quite powerful. And this is just, this is old school Japan. This is what I grew up on in cards. This is what a lot of people got used to in cards. So it's nice to see it return and sort of hold its place still. We then have Frontline. Frontline, they lost the 32nd Infantry, and it's been no issue replacing them. We just put in the Geberg's Pioneer, couple more Greyhounds, maybe a couple dive bombings. Other than that, it's the same deck. You've seen it before, you'll see it again. It's Frontline. We then have a unitless Brit USA deck. Now, this doesn't really worry about the board. You've got 4 firewalls, you've got 2 naval powers, you've got a Monty. The board, you just pin it, you slow it down, you don't let your opponent hit you in the face, and then you just burn out your opponent. You've got daylight bombings, you've got battery, you've got so many cards where you can just burn the face, you've got sea patrol. And if your opponent has healing, all of this burn combined with a Commonwealth, that can get through most healing decks. The only thing you do have to be careful for is island defense. Typically, you're going to want to put your opponent on 11 health until you can just burn them out in a single turn so they don't get that huge island defense healing, because that can really just put a stop in your plans instantly. You do also have Escort Group for just a little bit extra damage if you need it. And then this last deck, this deck is one of my favorite decks in the whole game. It goes by a lot of different names, but this is a sort of Heinz style deck. Now, I like to do it with combined arms. I like to go a little bit more all in on my panzers, but I know Baron likes to sort of do a more credit based game. You see, he's got Iron from the North in here. He's got 554. He's got Nashub. He's got Geberg's Pioneer. He's got so many ways of generating additional credits and dumping his hand quickly onto the board. And this is what this deck is all about. You want to have your hand on the board on turn 2 or 3 and nothing left in your hand. And then what that means you can do is you can play Enigma or you can play 5-year plan, and you can just draw your whole hand again, restart, redo the same thing. And what you're looking for here is to find a Blitzkrieg and just end the game on the spot through Blitzkrieg. It's a very, very quick game. It's very much all in. I'm either going to win in a few turns or I'm going to lose in a few turns. It's super exciting to play and it's super exciting to watch.
Amazing. Thank you for breaking that down, Bubbles. We do have the bands in here, so let's go ahead. Let's bring them up and let's take a peek and decide, who maybe have an advantage based on these bands. So, J King is going to lose that Soviet self-damage list. Baron gonna lose the Jagger list here. Spooz, any surprises based on these bands?
Honestly, I'm kind of surprised that Baron did not ban any of these discard lists because they're really annoying to play against, and they have a lot of healing with the island defense, which is specifically bad for the Baron's Brit deck, maybe. So yeah, I think Baron clearly has an idea here why he chose that one. I think it is still one of the best decks in the game, that self-damage list, and that's why he probably chose that one.
Any thoughts, Booze, around, hey, if I ban the, let's say, German-Japan discard control list, well, I still have to beat the other one. So if I can beat one, I might as well try and beat both of them. Is that potentially a thought there?
Yeah, probably. And on the other hand, I think Baron kind of having a more aggressive lineup here today. And yeah, maybe that's the reason. If you ban one, you still have to deal with the other. So why not deal with both? And I think he's maybe kind of, yeah, confident in beating at least one of those two. And yeah, me personally, I would have definitely banned the Japan version, I guess. That's really, really annoying with all these guards, pin, mass AoE, discard. Holy moly, no, not a deck to play against for me.
Bubbles, you agree with that? You think that maybe one of those kind of discard control lists might have been a safer bet, or you feeling what Baron's going with here?
I think looking at it from the perspective of just J King's decks, I would definitely ban all the discard lists. However, looking at it with Baron's decks, we have a lot of one drops. We have the Geberg's Pioneer, we have the 554th. Things like Bloody Sickles and Winter Warfets, they kind of shut down two of Baron's decks, and maybe even a third if this Jaguar deck gets through. So I think it's sensible from Baron to just be quite concerned about that. You do also have a couple island defenses in there, so they are still able to get a lot of healing. So I think it makes a fair amount of sense, but I don't think that would really be an incorrect decision either.
Well, let's get into it. Here we have our first quarterfinal of this OCC Ultimate, Baron versus J King.
Look at
What
that.
is
Turn
that
one, his
stuff?
hand is gone. This is what we like to see.
J King has an Aradu.
It's gonna get pinned though. He's not gonna be able to trade away with it for a couple turns. Does find a spot of removal. Baron would be very wise to go for the trade here.
Yeah, otherwise the air superiority can take out that Virulent. Finds the pursuit here. I think
And
it's
this
already kind
It's
of
looking
critical for
rather
Baron here,
slow.
right? Yeah, I mean, Baron having a really dominant start here, but once J King clears the board and finds an island defense additionally, then how's Baron ever winning here?
I mean, you
Needs-
do
needs
have a lot
draw
of ways
desperate.
of quickly refilling your hand. You've got stuff
Yeah.
like Enigma and 5-year plan. There are also two Blitzkriegs sitting somewhere in Baron's deck. You find a Blitz tank or two, you pair it with a Blitzkrieg, and I could see Baron easily finding lethal. J King going for the Greif here.
What I find quite interesting, that Baron is only playing one Enigma and one 5-year plan as draw. I mean, 22nd and Martyr additionally, but only one copy of Martyr, so not too much draw. A very cheap deck, and from, I think, in my opinion, a little bit too little amount of draw for just the curve that this deck is providing. Finds a Panzer 2A here. J King
He's
just
gonna
with
better dump his hand again if you'd like, right? You go for the Iron from the North, the Panzer, and the Pursuit, and you can easily dump your whole hand here if you desire. But instead, just deciding to hold on to the Pursuit, try and hit something higher value.
Now we see the strengths of the Schützen here. Soon, not yet.
I mean, you've got to play the Panzer B. I think you have to bounce the Schützen, force J King to spend most of his turn. He will get 2 credits back from the Nashub, but it's going to be most of his turn to deploy that and trade. And if Baron can find an Enigma here, that could easily, an Enigma or a Blitzkrieg, that could easily close out the game.
So that's like 3 out of 30 maybe.
I mean, there's other good cards in the deck, don't get me wrong, but this top deck here for J King, just able to trade out with the board and really shut down so much of Baron's advance. And this is one of the units I looked at when this expansion was coming out and thought this is going to be great in aggro. I didn't even consider how strong it could be in a control deck.
Yeah, it's just a very versatile removal, right? It's like you can split a hammer into several attacks, like 3 credits, deal damage to any frontline unit, and then you just get another copy and you can just distribute 3 damage whenever you want to. It is really, really strong, and especially annoying for decks like that Baron is playing. Like all these Panther 2s and stuff, they have 3 health and usually survive a lot of removal, but those 24s are just perfect answers for that.
J-King is down to 7 though, and Baron does have a lot of damage still on board. I could very easily see Baron being able to find lethal here. Momentum.
Not triggering
Gonna
the...
better.
It's not
No,
triggering...
but it will pour out the board.
This is gonna be a race here.
And that is...
J-King
It's a
needs-
lot of stats on board here for Baron, and J-King needs to find a way to clear just essentially everything.
Or an island defense would also help, but did not find it. Comet has to kill the autocannon, so J-King is technically surviving here.
He's gonna be
still
going
is.
down to 1.
He needs a Maelstrom
This
or
is
island
getting-
defense.
This is getting way closer than I was expecting it to.
So did you think Baron wins earlier, or J-King
No,
just...
I thought maybe you got like, 3 cards in your deck, but I thought J-King finds 1 island defense, he's fine.
Yeah.
And Baron holding back some resources, not going 2 in. However,
Not
that
what-
may come back to bite him, not playing the additional Panzer.
But J-King not having an answer, right? He has Annihilation, Sudden Strike, but 1 damage is enough. 4 targets on board here.
Yeah, unfortunately, not quite. 1 credit extra here for J-King, and he would have been able to push that Nashub to the front line. And Baron just about finding lethal here.
Whoa. That was really an aggressive start. And yeah, he also got some good top. I mean, the pursuit on turn 3 was not the perfect draw, but after that, drew everything he needed to close out the game here in time. And therefore taking the 1-0 lead over J-King. Wow. that was just a perfect start there for Baron, right? With 2
Yeah,
for
it was very
554s.
unfortunate for J-King to not find any healing as well. However, if Baron found like a Blitzkrieg or something, the healing could have potentially just not mattered. As 10 health is a lot of health, but against a Blitzkrieg, that's just negated almost instantly. And now we've got to see what they take to the next game. I'd like to see Baron take this USA frontline list because I think it is a little bit more consistent into discard. However,
He brings
does find a lot of draw. Look at that hand here for Baron with another draw card as well.
And the unit less deck actually has 1 unit. It's the 85th Pioneers. That's the only unit in the deck, and it's just there to reduce all these orders in cost. That means Baron now having access to a 2-credit ATS. And
You know what this means? We have to take the unitless title away because it's technically a unit in the deck. So
we can call it unitless except 1 unit deck. I don't know.
Instead of
It's a fun-
unitless, it's unitless because there's less of them. Now, Baron does need to play around these island defenses. I think it's very, very crucial that he's just aware of these and how he operates his turns. I'd like to see the daylight bombing come out here.
I think we are going to see that one. Reducing the amount of credits that J-King is having access to over the game.
It sort of serves 3 purposes here. You kill a unit, you remove some of J-King's resources credit-wise, and you remove J-King's ability to consistently sort of find cards throughout the game. So it's just very, very nice there. It's almost like a 3-for-1.
And a really good top deck there, finding the 2nd daylight bombing. J-King still at 3 credits. Barely enough to blitz that unit to the front line. Escort group. A card
I'd
that
like to see an ATS soon. I know there's a lot of Lend-Leases in hand, but I just feel like the sooner you get this ATS down, the quicker you can start to draw additional cards from it. And yes, we have triple Lend-Lease, but you would be surprised how quickly your hand can die down against discard.
finds the battery as well. There's one fortification. So might use the battery on one of those. So Esco Troop kind of, Baron has 3 copies of this in the list. Also new cards, the card that came with the Brothers in Arms expansion. When you play this, you can choose whether to shuffle. Yeah, we can see it right now. Do we?
No, he's
You could-
thinking about it. Going for the
Yeah.
healing. I think you normally take damage here, right?
You always
Over
take the
card
armaments,
draw.
right?
Yeah.
Not materials. Materials will draw you 4 or 8 cards, depending on how long that card stayed in your deck.
I like
And
this
I
though.
think with-
Drawing first.
Yeah.
Finding another firewall. You could potentially just double firewall and brick this front line. But saying, you know what, I have plenty of HP. I'm going to save it for a more pressing target, maybe a Stutzen.
Wolfpack might be coming in from J King here.
Is there a particularly good hit here? Obviously, J King not aware of what's in Baron's hand. Lend-Lease is a fairly solid hit, just with another Lend-Lease in hand and an ATS on J King's HQ. Baron is not going to have a shortage of draw. And actually holding back these firewalls also offers sort of bait for discard. J King plays discard. It has a very high chance of hitting a firewall, which I think if you're Baron with, if you're Baron here, you're reasonably happy with that.
I think the problem with the J King same here, he wants to deal 6 damage, I guess, and then therefore he cannot play the Wolfpack. The question is, I think he has to shut down the draw, but neither does he know that there are 2 Lend-Leases in Baron.
Oh, no. Baron just completely refilling. I believe it's not been long enough, so that's going to be, I believe, a 4 damage armament.
I think so as well, yeah.
Considering going for it, but J King will be able to heal back up to 20 if you do that. You sort of
Yeah, I
need
think he
to-
was just checking how much damage it is, because unfortunately you cannot see it on the card themselves. You just have to try it
But
out.
it's not been long enough since he played a single one, right?
Yeah.
But hey, better safe than sorry, especially when you're playing in an OCC Ultima. I would not want to mess up by miscounting my armaments turn counter.
So J King, yeah, that's the problem with the discard, right? Like you can discard Baron's hand, but that's 1 card out of 8, and he still
But
has a
J
lot
King
of.
can still do a lot of damage hit, right? You go for the firewall and then hit face with both units in the front line. That's 9 damage this turn. It sort of forces Baron to do something about the board. Also just puts Baron further away from the Commonwealth. There's the case yellow. Gonna be hitting the Lend-Lease, but not the end of the world still there if you're Baron. However, finding the supply shortage off the top of the deck and just putting another armaments back into the deck.
Now he has all 3 copies of armaments.
If you find all 3, you can end the game on the spot.
Yeah, he already has 1 in hand. Unfortunately lost the Lend-Lease there.
Oh, but J King finds the Comet. Decides to clear his hand.
And hits the ASW.
However, this deck here for Baron is full of card draw.
Yeah, he plays 3 Lend-Leases, 4
is
convoys,
No.
ATS activated. Yeah,
I don't think you can go for it, Baron.
he wants
He's
to draw,
thinking
right?
about it.
He
Oh, wait,
wants
it's
to
8
draw.
damage. That's lethal. It's an 8 damage one with the armaments. 12 damage from 2 armaments. And
He drew
J
the 8
King just
damage one?
burnt out. He drew the 8 damage one.
Oh,
And Baron taking an early 2-0 lead against the dominant discard deck. Baron showing that, hey, you can discard my cards all you want. They're still going to kill you. And now J King has to win 3 matches back to back against one of the most consistent decks in Cards history of USA Frontline. Sure, the consistency took a little bit of a hit, but it's still up there for consistency. It's still very, very dangerous, especially for discard decks, because generally they get their M4 Shermans off before you get your discard engines off. Jaking deciding to switch to Japan main. Generally, Japan offers more anti-aggro tools.
Dive bombing.
I don't hate going for the Gebergs into the trade. You could also just go for the 35 trade front line. I just feel like the chances that Jaking has an answer to Geberg's Pioneer are fairly low at this point.
And what can he have? He can have.
I mean, there's four
Nano.
unknown
Yeah.
cards in Jaking's hand as well, because one of them is this surprise attack, which you're obviously well aware of. And if there's a second surprise attack, you're okay with Jaking spending 2 of them.
Nice placement of the Geberg's Pioneers here. Because that means that the Under Fire cannot hit both of them. Under Fire, also a new card that deals damage to one unit and adjacent one and pins everything that got damaged. That can also just hit HQ if you just target a unit next to the HQ, which is quite interesting.
Now, Baron has a couple choices. I don't hate putting the Whirlwind in the front line because this stops a dragon. The dragon kill, I believe it is, or is it
Dragon
the
Slayer,
Storm
yeah.
Dragon?
Dragon Slayer, yeah.
And it also stops the KI-83 as well. But instead, deciding just to put the 5/4 into the front line because you do have the half track to answer these fighters, as well as this this dive bombing, which is really really good against these high attack units.
So, and Jaking knows he has some health to play around with because he has the island defense in hand. Therefore, just killing the backline units first and just taking care of these 5th Rangers later. But what will these answers be?
Ooh, Raiding Brigade gives Jaking a far better option than a pinned fighter.
Pins the 5th Rangers. Preserve some HQ health here to not
Now,
get
Baron
another.
finding
Ooh.
exactly what he needs here. Sherman is going to be able to refill Baron's hand. You could delay it by 1 turn because, yeah, you have the Greyhound to push up. The only concern would be if it gets discarded. However, with this current board state, if it gets discarded, you can really apply some pressure to face. Now, Jaking has a difficult decision here. Gonna go for the Audacity.
Hope to the 5th Rangers, probably. Not really.
Ooh, Blitzkrieg.
Is that lethal? It's 14 damage, right?
Yeah, that's lethal. You go for the Panzer 35T, you go for the Blitzkrieg, and that's
damage.
game right there. Baron
Exactly 13.
quickly 3-0ing the reigning world champion in a fairly decisive manner as well. Going for the Blitzkrieg, doing exactly 13 damage. And I think Baron's decks have spoken for themselves here.
Absolute dominance here. They just wrote in our internal chat that we just be prepared for a 1-hour series, but
yeah,
this was far away from 1 hour.
This is what you get when you travel the lands. You speak to the wise ones, such as Baron does. You get these decks which players aren't prepared to beat.
So Baron coming into this, and as much as I mentioned, I love Baron, I think from a community perspective, been phenomenal for the game, but going up against the defending world champion, Baron snuck in during the last clash, definitely wasn't the favorite in that matchup, and then just ran over Jaking, played quickly, played decisively. I mean, Bubbles, did that go according to plan?
Certainly went according to Baron's plan. Whether I can say the same about Jaking's plan, it was an unfortunate series of events for Jaking. You know, game 1 not finding any heal, the Blitzkrieg in game 3. I could have very easily seen things going to sort of like a 3-1 or a 3-2, but it felt like the moment Baron had sort of asserted his dominance against these discard decks, you're looking at Jaking's decks and you're sort of saying 2 of these just don't feel as good as they should do. These discard decks feel very oppressive a lot of the time. They feel like they're shutting down a lot of other really powerful and strong decks, but Baron just seemed perfectly comfortable against them, which I think is a testament to why Baron managed to win this series so decisively. Is J King had gone all in on a strategy, and Baron just seemed to shrug that strategy off.
And Spooz, you sort of mentioned this before the series as well, that Baron brought lists that were a little bit more aggressive. And is it a case where, if you draw the cards you need, I don't care what kind of control matchup it is, I can just get out there faster and kind of finish this game off before you can get what you need to stop me?
Yeah, I mean, we just saw it in the first match. A very aggressive starter from Baron, but as Bubbles mentioned, the games could have gone differently if Jakin just found an island defense, healed off, and then just cleared the board. Or found a sudden strike early on and stopped the snowball effect there from Baron, where you could just push unit after unit after unit. So, yeah, overall, you also need a little bit of luck, but yeah, it was a very dominant showcase here, and Baron definitely deserved to advance to the semis, and we will see him tomorrow. And I'm excited to see more of these decks, to be honest.
Absolutely. So huge congratulations to Baron. We're going to jump into a quick break. Honestly, Baron just ran over J King so quickly. We need to get things set up for that next quarterfinal. So stay tuned. We'll be back in a moment with Starry and Berto. Welcome back, everybody. It is time for our second quarter final. I am joined by Berto and Starry. Berto, you're fairly close to J King. How do you think he's feeling after that first matchup?
Well, I think there's gonna be a lot of salt to go around in his near vicinity. But he'll recover. He'll be in the next ultimate, and he's inevitable. He's going to win one of these ultimates one day. It might just take a little bit of time.
I like how you straight up just said he is inevitable. I like that. We're gonna write that down somewhere. We'll revisit that for sure. Starry, it sounded like you had gotten a pretty positive message from Baron after that matchup as well.
Yeah, Baron is definitely really excited. I would be too. I mean, that's an awesome win, especially having such decisive games. I think he made a lot of really good decisions, especially that Whirlwind at the end instead of going for the Sherman draw was like really crucial. So I'm just proud to see him make those right decisions and it work out for him.
Absolutely. It's unfortunate that it had to be at J King's expense, but Baron's a great dude, so excited to see him move on. Let's take a look at the bracket. Actually, get everybody up to speed before we get into this next quarter final. So there you see Baron going forward into the first semi. There, we've got Head versus Tang Tang up next for to decide who's going to be facing Baron tomorrow. As we'll take you through the quarters today. Tomorrow's going to be those semis, that bronze match, and the grand finals. You see Ozzy already making it into the semis due to Xiang being unable to submit their deck list in time. And then you got Vinny and Noen a little bit later on today. So let's get to know the players a little bit better here. We've got the player cards for you for both of these individuals, and we'll walk you through the deck list as well for this best of 5 series. They've brought 4 decks. We're going to ban one, and we'll get you right into the action. So let's start with Head here. So 29,000 total matches. That is way up there. 65% win rate. Just to emphasize how tough it is to maintain a 65% win rate over that many games, qualifying 4th here for the ultimate. Starry, anything you want to add in regards to Head?
I think that Head has historically been really fun to see. Has definitely brought some interesting decks in the past, and is just like a really nice guy. I don't know if any of you guys have had the pleasure of getting to talk to Head, but he's like such a nice guy, and so getting to see him here, always love to see such nice people make it.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and bring up the deck list here. And Starry, you can walk us through exactly how Head has equipped themselves for this quarterfinal.
Yep, so Head's first deck is a Britain-Japan credit denial, and it looks pretty standard, running 1 fortification on top of 1 sincerely yours, 1 naval power. These are sort of the numbers that people have been landing on. What I think is interesting is that Head is running Dragon Slayer, which hasn't really been super explored in this archetype. Before the rotation, people used to run Hien a lot for quick burst damage. And seeing Dragon Slayer, it's a lot cheaper than Hien, and it's a 6/5 as opposed to a 5/4. So I'm definitely curious to see, is it going to be able to get the damage in? Because, so much of Hien is blitz, right? Having blitz is so important. And so I'm curious if the Dragon Slayer will get to stay around for a turn to hit for 6. And then Head has brought 3 different German discard decks. Well, Germany being either the primary or secondary nation. The first one being Germany-Japan, which we saw a lot in the last OCC. And what I find really interesting about all of Head's decks, if you'll notice, all of Head's decks are running 2 copies of Sky Barons. And Sky Barons is not a card that usually sees play in more than one, but with the rise of units such as Dragon Slayer and the increasing prevalence of people playing strong air units in Japan or Germany main discard, in Germany main people usually go for the Focke-Wulf 190. And in the Japan main discard, people go for units like Shiden, Kika, Dragon Slayer, and so air units, big air units that get hit hard by Sky Barons are really prevalent right now, and Head is definitely making a meta choice, a meta tech choice to tech his deck specifically against these big air unit discard decks. I think that Head's last deck, the Soviet Germany deck, is definitely the most unique of the three discard options. The Germany Japan is pretty standard. The Japan Germany is also pretty standard. But the Soviet Germany we haven't seen a whole lot of, playing these units like 272nd guards and just really big, difficult to deal with units. But yeah.
I think it's so unique that we're early on in this meta still, and you've got somebody like Head who is trying to shoehorn this same sort of strategy into three different nations just because I imagine they think it's strong enough that, hey, this is worth bringing 3 times over. I just have to figure out how to make it work.
Yeah, and we've seen that from a couple different players now. We saw it from J King in the last OCC, and yeah, discard is really strong right now. Wolfpack, Annihilation, and Case Yellow are all really strong, and we're going to continue to see them. I think that we've Bubbles talked about earlier that it's a question of whether these aggro decks can break through these discard lineups.
And we saw Baron do it, so it is absolutely possible. Discard not only strong, but just an absolute joy to play against. Let's go to the flip side here and take a look at Tang Tang's player car. 15,000 matches, cracking that 70% win rate. So absolutely phenomenal over a strong period of time. Berto, anything you want to add regarding Tang Tang as a player?
Well, we see him here often, and that's for a reason, right? Even with a comparatively low total number of matches, you could even say against some of these other top players, which, you know, it's a lot of games for sure. But compared to some of these longtime veterans like J King, it's a little on the lower side of total matches, but still incredible win rate for lifetime win rates.
Hilarious that you can say 15,000 matches is just not quite that many, really. But that definitely does not mean Tang Tang will not be prepared for this ultimate. So let's take a look at their lineup here. Berto, why don't you take us through exactly what Tang Tang's bringing to the game?
Right, so we have an Italy minor deck, which is something we haven't really been seeing so often since the rotation of Mare Nostrum. However, Tang Tang here is looking to take advantage of some of that good removal in Italy, like Lion for a Day, Attack in the Colonies, and those nice cards like Decisive Defense and the 7 Falpini regiments. So I'm really excited to see how that works out for him. And of course, this is a ramp deck. It runs things as heavy as B17F, which can really be an issue for discard if they don't hit it with the discard before it comes down. And you even have the M4A1s, another nice little tech against discard. So where we saw Baron try to go under the discard decks, Tang Tang might be looking to go over top of them, so to speak. Next up, we have another ramp deck, this time Britain main, using heavy cards like the Grenadier Guards, even Comet. Not the German Comet you're usually used to seeing, but Comet with a C, A34 Comet, which draws a card each time you damage your opponent's HQ. I'm really excited to see that card in play, because I don't know that I've ever seen it in play in a tournament setting. But in this discard meta that it seems that we might be finding ourselves in, it might be a really nice little tech choice. And next up, we have a classic that we've seen a few times already. We have a Jagro, without, of course, Feigned, but you do get the ability to run a few more orders, like the Shinano, the Audacity, Bombing Raid, which, of course, I love to see. And finally, we have a German-Japan Heinz list, running things like Panzer III F to buff all of your tanks, running things from Japan like the Type 93 and Type 94 TK, which will also benefit from those buffs. Running 2 copies of Honorable Death, trying to just run fast removal, get your opponent beat down quickly, much similarly to how Baron's deck performed with Soviet Miner against J-King. A very similar strategy we're seeing here today.
It seems like it's going to be a little bit of a similar matchup in the way of Tang Tang bringing things more of that ramp, a little bit quicker style, and Head leaning more on the discard and the control side of things. Let's go ahead and bring up the bands here and see exactly what we're going to, what tools these players are going to have to go head to head. So, Head is losing the Germany Japan discard list, probably the one that's the most popular, and then the US Italy ramp goes on Tang Tang's side. Starry, any thoughts here? I mean, the Germany Japan feels like a pretty, I want to say standard ban, but one we've seen time and time again here. US Italy ramp getting the ban hammer. Why is that?
I mean, I think it's the most different out of Tang Tang's list. Tang Tang's other lists are more aggressive, and so kind of solidifying the archetype, the types of decks that you're going to be seeing, makes it so that you had clearly picked a control lineup for a very specific reason, and so just kind of forcing Tang Tang to play all sort of aggressive style decks.
And here we go getting into it in our second quarterfinal. We got Head taken on Tang Tang.
Right, and here in the Mulligans, we see Tang Tang keeping an Hour of Need, a bit of a risky call, but if you hit that War Machine on turn 2 and get rewarded, it can really put you super far ahead and really play into your game plan. But Tang Tang didn't find it in his other 3 cards. He'll really be looking for it and his next draw. And Head keeping
deciding to
all the
keep
discards
those
he
case
sees.
yellows.
Yeah. Well, it is a little bit of a later game matchup. You do have a little more affordability to be a little greedy and keep that discard.
Yeah, with ramp, you're going to be having to spend a lot of your cards, like for example, this Hour of Need, on getting to those higher credit numbers. So by the time you get there, you sometimes don't have that many cards left in hand and can be a little bit vulnerable to those discard effects. And so I think that's what Head is relying on, hoping that by the time Tang Tang gets up to those high credit numbers, that everything is going to be gas. And no matter what you hit, it'll be good.
Head is gonna run into some trouble playing these case yellows even as early as turn 5, though, if he doesn't want to mill cards from the top of his deck. And that could be an issue. Tang Tang going for ASW patrol, getting that first discard done. And a wolf pack.
Ooh.
That's a big hit.
Yeah, for sure. Being able to ramp 3 credits and destroy an opponent's unit and be able to force them to overdraw, especially a card like Wolfpack. I mean, that ASW patrol is performing like quadruple duty.
And Tang Tang very nicely is going to increase the costs of Head's hand by 1, and with an 8-card hand, that's a huge impact.
Yeah, we see the first of those 2 Skyburns coming out. And Tang Tang definitely has a plethora of targets for them. We see the Sky Barons paying off. Tang Tang has B-17, Lancaster, lots of different strong air units that Head is relying on those Sky Barons to deal with.
Tang Tang is just going for the beatdown. This Skytrain is a little bit annoying to deal with, so Tang Tang just saying, okay, I'll hit you in the HQ then. Which seems pretty reasonable. There's not a lot that Head can do in this situation.
Yeah, and the problem with bombers is that partisans, they don't deal damage when they are, sorry, they don't take damage when they're attacking, and so partisans oftentimes is used to trade off your opponent's units, but when your opponent has bombers, it becomes really hard to get rid of it when Partisans is one of your primary removal pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a really difficult decision for what to play here for head. You can use Partisans just to bounce a card, try to reduce a little bit of damage, but that seems a little more like a not losing play rather than a winning play.
Tang completely uninterested with the defense of their HQ, which, I mean, of course makes sense when you're pressuring your opponents so much. Head hasn't really had any opportunity to make forward progress on board, just trying to survive, but these guard units are not doing much against Tang's bomber heavy strategy.
Yeah, and I'm not seeing much that head can do here. I think it's already game. Head can technically survive this turn with Partisans bouncing the B-17 Flying Fortress, but what do you do on the next turn?
Yeah, the options are limited, and the only draw in Head's hand is going to come in the form of Case Yellow, which, although ordinarily is a fantastic card, right now it's just not what they need.
The B-17 hitting a light infantry, not the strongest thing to hit, of course, but it is one of the ones in the front line.
Yeah, and 3 of the 5 units are light infantry. It's pretty likely.
Yes. And that's game for Tang. Another quick one.
Yeah, given 2 control decks like that, 2, you know, as you were talking about just at the beginning of the match, those decks are not really meant to end that early. They're meant to go into the late game, but in that case, the late game was rather early.
Yeah, and His Majesty's Chosen really showing up with that Lancaster B3, having an absolutely huge impact on that game. Head, interestingly, decides to keep 2 Bryansk regulars to put a lot of anti-aggression out there, which makes a lot of sense, especially after he saw experience last game.
Yeah, and having something to protect other units like the artillery. Obviously, this artillery is not going to be getting attacked anytime soon, but Head's other units will be able to contest Tang's aggressive pieces, and so being able to protect those other units early, while those units like the artillery pick off Tang's early aggression, is going to be really helpful for Head.
And really nice that Head is positioning his units on the left side of his HQ. That means that if Sendai comes down to remove a guard, then when Sendai dies, it will place the guard on the right side. And if you've positioned on the left side of your HQ for the whole game, then that means that your guard is going to immediately guard your HQ, which is really important, but something a lot of players overlook.
And we see that that Sendai for Tang, but it's not going to be useful for a while. And we see Head's choice of keeping 2 Bryansk regulars kind of paying off.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially with this BM, the Katyusha from Head, it looks like this might be able to grind out a lot of value or at least force a Sendai.
And the artillery barrage starts. Tang is going to be essentially losing a small unit every turn to that artillery until it can be taken care of. And obviously, you could take care of it with these surprise attacks of the Sendai, but all 3 of Head's units are like must kill, and Tang just can't deal with all of them.
Yeah, if you deal with the Katyusha, which you need to deal with, then it leaves you a little lacking in the other departments, and you're giving the control deck lots of time, which is never what you want to be doing. But Tang Tang's hand is a little bit forced here. Looks like the surprise attacks will be coming out, which I think makes sense. The Sendai has some removal options that would get this artillery back out with Blitz, which would be a huge issue.
Head drawing a red banner, but not really super helpful in this particular instance. It's a great combination with partisans. But the partisans red banner is mostly meant for decks that have really big units that can be taken care of while creating a huge unit off of red banner. The bigger the better, right? So not going to be super useful in this matchup, but
Yeah, but here we're really finally seeing where discard shines when it gets to this mid game and they're allowed to play all their discard, just card after card, and generating more and more value. And that
yeah,
bonus
Tang
damage.
exactly like you were saying, that bonus damage makes it such a great target for rifles. It trades. You are getting rid of a unit, and are going to be able to trade it with 2 different units. That rifles is like a 4-for-1 right here.
Yeah, Tang Tang's deck sort of working a little bit against him, with this decision to go for the Snug Breeze, which is not something you see too often. But Soviet's really able to take advantage of the opponent's list with cards like Partisans and Big Brother, as some people like to call it.
So Tang Tang decides to go for the Sendai on the rifles. Do you think that signals that Tang Tang isn't really preparing to deal with these Bryansk anytime soon? Do you think that the Tang Tang is going to try and recoup some of that board presence before creating another assault?
Well, I think that it signals that he's not really able to deal with the front line if that 5/5 moves up, which is a common issue, I would say, for Heinz. That if they lose control of the front line, they're not really able to buff their units very effectively, and it begins to make some cascading issues when you're limited in your board space, and when most of your units have low attack. You have a lot of 1 degrees, a lot of 2 degrees, and that's really just not built well for taking back the front line from a medium to large threat, like a 5/5.
These mobile defenses are extremely difficult for Tang Tang to deal with. Being able to not only defend, but if Tang Tang does decide to play additional units, obviously not this turn, but if Tang Tang does have the opportunity, that opportunity is not really going to be present due to those mobile defenses. So if you're Tang Tang here, you probably realistically need an Enigma to get back into this game, but the problem with this card is that in getting rid of your hand, they're getting rid of their own hand as well, and so you don't get these big Enigma plays.
Yeah, and without the option for a big Enigma, Tang Tang says that that's probably game for him, and I would agree. And Head picks back up a game from Tang Tang after the quick first match. We have a series.
So Head is going to be picking between a credit denial and a Japan-Germany discard list. And Tang Tang is either going to have to run it back with Heinz or play Jagro. And it looks like he's opting for running it back with Heinz.
A very fast hand from Head here. Plays very differently to the discard list he played before with the Bryansk regulars with the guard. Instead, this deck sort of forced to rely more so on removal in the the Type 94s and the air superiorities, but both very strong openers.
Yeah, despite being low on cost, the Errado, the air superiority, the surprise attack, that hand is deadly and will quickly make work of Tang Tang's units. The question is, will Tang Tang be able to recoup?
Especially with that 24th Cavalry as well now. That's going to trade 1-for-1 with a 2-drop and get another 24th Cavalry. That's a huge boon for Head here. And it's not like Tang Tang is coming up on credits either if he moves up this Whirlwind. But he does choose to keep it back, which is smart, to play around this 24th Cavalry. A little weaker into something like Dragon Slayer, but you don't always have the option to play around everything.
Yeah, so these 24th Cavalries can be really, really tricky to play around when you're playing a deck that needs the front line, like, for example, Heinz, of course, because you're spending like 4 of your units, you have to get them to the front line, you're spending like 4 of your units, and they're spending 1 card. However, the upside of you dumping your hand and them only using 1 card, playing it over and over and over again, is that it does open you up for an Enigma to refill.
Tang Tang smartly continuing to play around this 24th Cavalry. But Head has a few options. He can go for the discard, just play a Wolf Pack, which could be very powerful if it hits this Enigma. You can guard up with the 41st, I believe it's called.
Yeah, believe it or not,
Infantry Regiment.
61st.
61st?
And
Oh, my bad.
no problem. And so Head is opting for the 61st. Tang Tang is getting frighteningly close, actually, to be able to hit for a big Blitzkrieg turn, potentially even a lethal Blitzkrieg turn, if Tang Tang can just get 1 or 2 more units. The problem is, without a Greif, the operation cost to get those units to the front line means that it is going to need to be a couple more turns before Tang Tang realistically has the credits to go for that option. But that's going to be something that Head is going to constantly have to keep in the back of his mind as the game continues.
Ooh, and the Shenano. And Head's gonna go for it. A lot of randomness here. And killing both Whirlwinds. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, that's huge.
Really good for Head.
Yeah, only hitting the HQ twice.
And now this Blitzkrieg setup from Tang Tang is looking a lot harder to pull off, at least for a turn.
Yeah, but given that that is Tang Tang's main win condition, and Tang Tang does have these tools like Panzer IIIH, Heinkel, and Enigma to draw another hand, Tang Tang is going to have to work on over the next couple of turns, essentially just like getting to the same position they were before, right? Just trying to recreate a board, recreate that blitzkrieg pressure. Once you have that pressure on, it can force some suboptimal plays out of your opponent in an effort to stay alive.
And this 4 glory offers a really cheap option to remove this elite plane, the Jagd Bomber. You can 4 glory, you can push up and get a guard down. And that's a lot of issues presented for Tang Tang's list. But Tang Tang is going to be able to draw a lot of cards here. You're able to trade out the 34th, drawing a card for head. You're able to Honorable Death, drawing another card for head. And then you can recoup all that card disadvantage with the Enigma.
Yeah, Honorable Death does seem like it's more designed to take care of aggressive lists that might contest the front line for Tang Tang. As you said, Tang Tang really does need to capitalize on having the front line in order to win with this deck. But yeah, you're right. In this situation, the Honorable Death actually is drawing a card for both players makes it pretty reasonably strong.
Yeah, for sure. It's like it's like you didn't even I mean, you're just paying 1 credit instead of 3, right? And that's a huge advantage you're getting there. But again, we talked about last game how taking back the front line can be a little awkward for this Heinz list. And we're seeing that again here, where you have to trade out first to play the type 90 degree to increase the damage of your other tanks. And you can't play the Greif right away to get the maximum out of the credit reduction. It's all just a little bit awkward.
Yeah, and notably, Tang Tang doesn't have any blitz tanks in his hand, which means that both his hand and support line are going to continue to stay pretty crowded, at least for the next turn or two. And Head using the pin on the Heinkel to take advantage of that, it seems like Head has a pretty good understanding of how to punish the situation for Tang Tang.
Absolutely. But even when Tang Tang is forced to play a little inefficiently, he still has a huge hand, which keeps him in the game.
Yeah, Head does have access to discard orders, but they're expensive. It's really difficult to play more than one of them in any given turn. So it is going to take Head a while if he desires to start making progress on eliminating Tang Tang's hand. But having that board pressure, in addition to the potential 1 discard per turn, attacking on multiple fronts, I guess, is the way to go.
There's that second Enigma. So if Head plays some discard and misses a few times, that Enigma could be really big. Tang Tang is able to drop his hand a lot faster than Head, of course, with all these 1-drops.
Yeah, and the Greif is only going to accelerate that process. So Tang Tang does have the option to push up and deal with the Aichi, but Tang Tang also knows that Head has the 24th Cavalry in hand and is thus choosing to hold back and just opt for the pin instead, which seems to be playing towards a blitzkrieg within the next turn or two.
Yeah, and Tang Tang choosing to not take any risks on the discard, just say, well, 4k to draw 4 is really good, and I'm going to take that. I think that that's enough cards to win the game, which it certainly could be. Although, to the last man presents some issues. But
Yeah, and having
course,
that 5 damage on Head's HQ from way earlier in the game is really awkward, because Head doesn't want to burn an island defense, getting back to 20. But at the same time, it makes these Blitzkrieg, the Blitzkrieg math look a little bit nicer in Tang Tang's favor.
yeah, is this lethal, by the way? I think it is.
Yeah, with the
Yeah.
Blitz buff, yeah, it is.
Right, very nicely played from Tang Tang here.
Yeah, understanding what the matchup requires to just amass a board in the backline and then go for a Blitzkrieg late in the game. Tang Tang was playing towards that endgame the entire time, clearly understanding very well what needed to get done.
And now Tang Tang only needs to win with Jagro over 2 games, which is a difficult thing for Head to face into. Jagro, it has bad matchups, but it can certainly win against any deck. It's still the fastest deck in the game. Maybe you could argue that Baron's Heinz with the Soviet Miner and Iron from the North is faster, but in general, Jagro is such an issue and such a common deck on ladder because of its speed.
Yeah, Head does get the boon of going first. You know, he's going to be a little bit down on resources, but once he draws the 24th Cavalry, he should be able to recoup those resources pretty quick. So the question is Tang Tang going to be able to take the front line expansion and get out the pressure before Head can quash that?
And Head is really finding these early game removal options that J King failed to find in his matchup, which is certainly good for Head, although it's always a little awkward having a Rado when you're going first and you have another unit, because, well, you can just pass on turn 1, but that doesn't feel so great. You're not able to get the trade-off. But it means that you have nothing to do on turn 2 because you don't want to play your Rado to not draw a card.
Yeah, and as we see this, I don't know if it's better to call it a new Jagro or an old Jagro, because it looks very similar to Jagros from years and years and years ago. But in the current iteration of Jagro, it usually is better to go for these early expansions over getting pressure. Having cards in hand turns out it's pretty strong. So it might not seem intuitive, but it usually is a good idea to get the expansions out as early as possible. Give yourself options and longevity.
And yeah, who would have thought that 1k draw 2 is pretty good?
Now, Tang Tang doesn't know it, but that Dragon Slayer, as of right now, is really, really difficult for Head to remove.
Getting this card draw engine online is also a very tempting offer. It will likely die to a case yellow. You could even go for the Shinano to try your luck a little bit, see if you can remove all 3 of these units.
Ooh. That's a big hit for that case yellow, but that's also a fantastic top deck for Tang Tang, especially with that many cards in hand. It essentially translates to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 damage just from one funny little 1 credit card. And that's only counting cards in hand.
Yeah, unless you get a wild shenano that kills the signal regiment and goes the rest of the HQ. I've seen it before. Believe it or not.
Crazier Shinanos have occurred.
I'm going for the naval supply run.
The self-discard element of Naval Supply Run shouldn't hurt too bad with this many cards in hand, and Head is still a couple turns away from being able to hit Tang Tang with a Maelstrom or anything like that.
Oh, terrible shenano. Oh, absolutely awful.
Oh, but that self-discard does hurt. Signal is one of the stronger cards in hand.
Oh, but how does Head deal with this board now? You needed to at least kill one of those targets. And I think realistically that Shinano should have dealt with one of those targets. It could have dealt with 2. And then this game is in a whole different place. But Tang Tang's gonna deal 8 damage this turn, and potentially get down a key.
Yeah, I'm not gonna run the math, but I can tell you that was definitely not particularly likely to hit 1 damage to every unit. Just not enough to kill them. And then like all the other damage to the HQ. This 22nd is quickly becoming a threat. It's a 5-2.
And man, that would be a good board to have desperate measures on instead. Unfortunately for Head, that card is gone, long gone. And he has to settle for Shenano, which is sometimes better, of course, but
Head
sometimes
does
we
have
see these situations.
Head does have a plethora of options, but are any of them gonna be quite enough? It doesn't really seem like it. It's gonna definitely require at least a couple cards to hang on, as well as inevitably a island defense in the next turn or two.
Yeah, a plethora of options, yes. A plethora of good options? No, that's a little more complicated of a question. But
They're not bad options, they're just not like exactly what Head needs.
he does get brought below 10, which is in some ways an advantage when you have these island defenses.
That Shinano, if Head doesn't play a unit, it's gonna be pointed all at the HQ, and that makes the required damage needed for lethal for Tang Tang a lot lower. We see Tang Tang doing a similar strategy to the last game to play around these 24th Cavalries, only pushing units to the front line when they're either going to make some good trades or get some good damage in. You know, opting, for example, for that Aichi.
Now, I want to take another look at Head's list just to see what sort of AoE removal options he has. There is to the last man, however, there's no Maelstrom and there's no Bonsai.
In that case, it's going to be very, very difficult for Head to get out of this situation. Now, if Head does have options, right? But because they're a little bit suboptimal, Head can't afford to play them all in one turn. And Tang Tang is just putting on the pressure.
And so far, the sort of discard meta that we found ourselves in hasn't really been showing up too well. The alternative strategies working out here for Tang Tang and Baron von Glower.
Yeah, I mean, Baron last OCC had a discard heavy lineup and was defeated by Vinny, and swapping to a more aggressive lineup definitely seems to be the way to go.
And that's the interesting part, right? We had these scenarios where, okay, this control stuff, this discard stuff, it's a pain to play against. We've kind of seen it, time and time again. But all of a sudden, these more aggressive, slightly quicker decks or ramp decks are actually outperforming them. Starry, you're kind of nodding along here. Any thoughts on why is it? Because, and we saw it more so in the first matchup, like J King was just missing key cards, couldn't heal, couldn't do those little things that would allow the game to stretch out and swing it in his favor. Is that the case here, where it's bad draws or not getting the right things to stop your quicker opponent?
I think it's that people are learning how to play against discard. Tang Tang was keeping all of his units back to play around the 24th, and so we in the last OCC, it was the first OCC since the new expansion and rotation, and discards seem to be really, really strong. And now that people have more practice, are getting more opportunities to test against it, the meta is kind of solving itself a little bit more. And if you play correctly, if you play around Island Defense, if you play around 24th, discard kind of struggles.
Do you think that's what we're going to continue to see, Berto, as players get more and more comfortable with these decks, with the new cards? They start to refine them. They start to see kind of where the gaps are, that they can then exploit them and continue their winning ways.
I think in the tournament setting, yes, but I think on the ladder setting, where you're playing against a lot of players who aren't as adept at playing around Island Defense, not as adept at playing around 34th, that discard is still going to probably reign for longer, as it takes a longer time on ladder for people to make those adjustments to their play.
I will not lie. There is nothing that makes me want to yeet my phone out a window more than discarding my win condition, thanks to something like Annihilation. So, I think that's pretty adept. Let's take a look at the bracket here and see where we're at as we've completed our second semifinal, and we get into, I mean, in theory, our last one is we see Tang Tang defeating Head 3-1. We see Baron defeating J King 3-0. Azzy will move forward as Yang was unable to submit their deck list in time. So we just got Vinny versus Noin as our final matchup here. Going to be a heck of a matchup as well, because Vinny typically brings some interesting stuff. Again, I believe Starry mentioned during the last OCC was able to kind of take advantage of folks in general bringing a little bit more of that control style and being able to sort of take advantage of that and move forward. So I believe we're going to jump into a quick break here as we get the players lined up, we get everything all sorted, and we'll get into our last matchup of the day. Don't forget to tune in tomorrow at the same time as we get our semifinals, our bronze, and our grand finals going here at the second ever OCC Ultimate. Welcome back, everybody. I'm joined here by Spooz and Bubbles for our final quarterfinals of the day. So we are going to run through this last matchup, getting you ready for tomorrow, where we're giving away the big bucks, $3,000 on the line here. Let's bring up the bracket quickly, just to get you up to speed with what's been going on today during day one of this OCC Ultimate. So there you see Jakin getting 3-0'd by Baron von Glower. Baron's going to be going up against Tang Tang, who defeated Head 3-1. Azzy moving forward as Xiang was disqualified for a late deck submittal. And Vinny versus Noin is going to be our last quarterfinal matchup. Quick reminder, these are best of fives. 4 decks, 1 ban. Let's get right into this last matchup here. So we're going to have Vinny perform very well in the last OCC clash. Always known as a very strong deck builder, bringing some creative stuff, bringing some really, really solid decks. So let's bring up Vinny's player card here and take a look at Vinny's lifetime stats. 19,000 total matches, nearly a 70% win rate, coming in third here in the qualification for this ultimate. Spooz, talk to me about Vinny.
Yeah, as you just mentioned, Winnie just won the last OCC Clash event and therefore finishing third in the Ultimate today here. Yeah, as you said, a really good deck builder. And also after the new expansion drop, we just saw Winnie with a 100-point gap to rank 2 in the ladder there. So Winnie really ahead of time there, just finding what is good early on in the meta and just dominating it kind of, and just resulting in winning the OCC Clash and being here today, and also bringing some old stuff that we've already known, and maybe just he experimented a lot with the new cards and just found the decks that we already had are still working, and that's why we see a lot of familiar stuff here from Winnie. And Winnie really experienced whenever he's just in the tournaments. You can just feel how much card games experience he has. And these are the 4 decks that Winnie is bringing here today. First of all, we have just Germany, Britain combined arms, a deck that was really dominant a few months ago or last year, better said. And Winnie is just bringing this today. So a deck that revolves a lot around stacking different unit types and then just buff your tanks with combined arms. It also just takes the opportunity to have Blitzkrieg in the deck with Germany as one of your factions, a card that is really strong at the moment, because a lot of strong guards have rotated out with the rotation. So all you mostly need is 2-3 units in the front line, play Blitzkrieg, kill your opponent. I would not be surprised if we see a change or a nerf on that card soon, because in the current state of the game, it's just a little bit too strong. Then we just have a deck that, one of the most decks brought today here, Soviet Japan self-damage. We took a look at this early on. So one interesting tech choice here maybe is the new card Stand Together, a card that costs 1 credit and destroys one of your friendly unit and gives you a tank with the same cost, and this tank has Blitz. And the good synergy with this is if you can just manage to put out an early 34th guards, that 6/6 guy that gets cost reduced whenever you play a self-damage order, you can just push this to the front line for 1 credit, then play Stand Together on it and just blitz out a KV2 that is a 6/5 tank with heavy armor 2, I guess, which cannot be targeted or not be attacked by artillery or air units. And additionally, it has Blitz. So a really cool synergy there and really annoying for your opponent to deal with. And hope we're going to see that combo. But overall, a really solid deck. We've seen it a few times. And just gets a little bit improved by Island Defense now, which gives you a little bit more consistent healing. Because all of this self-damage can backfire really hardly when you play against stuff like Jagro maybe, or other aggressive decks that can blitz out a lot of damage. So Island Defense kind of gives you a little bit more room to play around with your HQ health. Then we have Japan, Germany, Jagro, a deck that performed quite well today here and also in the past. People just trying to figure out how and if this is working without Feint Retreat, and we just see that Expansion is back in the deck 4 times. Expansion brought here by Winnie. Then we have stuff like Enigma that didn't give you additional draw. And one interesting tech choice here is the BF109 Tropical, one copy of it. Yeah, would be interesting to know what the thought process behind this is. Maybe to just have an additional strong air unit, other to the Key 83 and the Dragon Slayer. So kind of, yeah, if your opponent, most opponents, if they play air removal, they play Sky Barons. We just saw Head bringing 2 copies, but no one is bringing 3 copies. So you have 3 really strong air units here that you can push on board, just together with this really, really aggressive 1-drop early aggression pressure on your opponent. And then we just have the return of Brit Air. Brit Japan Air is back, brought by Vinny here today. Dragon Slayer, really good fit into the stack because the 4-credit 6/5 fighter is, yeah, not too shabby, I would say. And yeah, other than that, he's just bringing 6 Air Landing Brigade, a new card that was introduced. When this is on board, all your units with 1 attack deal 3 combat damage instead. Important to know that it's only combat damage and not effects when your units attack the HQ. It will still be 1 damage, but it can be really strong if you have this on board. Just this unit alone is a 2-credit 3/4 with Fury, which is really impressive and kind of good against aggressive decks to just deal with their frontline stuff. And I'm excited to see how good Brit Air is performing in the current meta.
It's the first time we'll really see it back in the tournament setting here since the expansion. Let's take a look at Vinny's opponent, No 5. Again, not any type of stranger here to the OCC. 18,000 matches, 75% win rate. Bubbles. Any surprise seeing No in here and just being one of those mainstays in the tournament scene?
And yeah, there's absolutely no surprise at all. He's been about for a while. I imagine he'll be around for a while. He's just sort of one of those names where you've seen it a long time. If you run into it in ladder, you're generally quite scared about what's coming. You see War Machine, his favorite card, and I think anyone that's known for a while has seen this in his decks. He seems to have this habit of saying, well, maybe I could build a Brit Air deck with War Machine. Maybe I could build like a Jaggro deck with War Machine. He just seems to try and slot it in absolutely everywhere. And I think somewhat reasonably, it's probably the best ramp card in the game, because the sooner you play your ramp, the better payoff you get, the quicker you get to use those additional credit slots. So yeah, I find it very fitting that he's put that as his favorite card, because it really speaks true in his gameplay.
Well, Bubbles, let's see if no one was able to squeeze War Machine into any of the decks that they are bringing here today.
Well, the first deck we do see 4 copies of War Machine, of course. It is a Brit USA ramp deck. Now, this has, quite a few draw engines with the ramp, because you have the Quartermasters plus triple ASW patrol. Now, if you have a Quartermasters on board and you play ASW, you gain 3 credit slots, draw 3 cards, and kill an enemy unit on board. So you essentially just get to go to Value Town with it. We also have a lot of heavy cards. We've got things like the Lancaster, the Commonwealth, the Churchill Havre. So this deck, you're going to try and, turn 1, not too much happening. If you're lucky, you'll get a Pioneer. Turn 2, you can put down your Honeys, you can put down your War Machines, and then you really just start developing your game from there. Against aggressive decks, you've got Honey into supply shortage to just shut down aggression. And against slower decks, you do have all this ramp and draw. The next deck is just, it's your fairly bog standard Japan ally self damage. We've seen people putting in the island defenses like Spooz say. It just gives you that little bit of security. We've also got the Dragon Slayer. It's just a very well-statted 4-drop. It feels like the K83 without the draw aspect. And a lot of decks are trying to just slot in one of these. We did theorycraft a bit. Would people be playing 1 or 2? Because obviously if you have 2, you have a bigger chance of finding one of them. With still only a small chance of finding both. But for now, it seems 1 is the sort of preferred number. We do also have the counteroffensive in here, which does just offer that potential for a ridiculous amount of damage out of nowhere. And then obviously this new BM13N, this is just against decks that can't answer it. WinCon in itself. It feels like a Comet, but for the Soviets. And you see Comet being played in quite a few aggressive decks, so it makes sense that we see this here. This next deck can only be described as a Japan USA mid-range deck. You might think, oh, Japan USA with War Machines and Bolster, this is an OTK deck. Not in the slightest. Yes, we do have the Bolster Shielding combo, but we don't have Burst of Fires, we don't have Tonys, we don't have anything like that. The main purpose of this deck is to play the absolute strongest 4-drops that you can possibly find. You've got things like K83, KI45, and the 5th Rangers. You've got these 4 War Machines. So your game plan normally is going to be, drop a 1-drop on turn 1 to buy a bit of time, play a War Machine, and then drop a sort of just game-swinging tempo 4-drop. And this is something I love to play around with War Machine as well, is what 4-drops can I try and exploit? And if you put a K83 down on turn 3, a lot of the time your opponent's not going to be able to answer that. And then this final deck, this was really, really popular for a very short period of time. This is Germany Soviet Pincer. And look how small that deck list is. Look how many it is, because you've got a lot of 3-drops and a lot of 4-drops, a lot of the same cards over and over again. Now, this deck, when it first came out, it seemed ridiculous. It seemed unstoppable. And you'd think, oh, well, I can just kill the Astrakhan with Sudden Strike. A lot of what made the deck good was the autocannon, the Petliakov, these sorts of cards combined with the 101 infantry. You could very quickly build up huge artillery and bombers in the back line, and it could be really problematic for your opponent. Now, this has been pushed aside. Discard has sort of taken over. You've got things like Island Defense, which are quite good answers just to reset the game. We have seen an uptick in the amount of sudden strikes and the amount of dive bombings which have been played. Dive bombing is very good against this deck because it allows you to trade into these high statted units very easily. This is quite a high rolly deck. However, it does have more longevity than you would first assume. In a similar way to how Heinz can, because you've got things like Marder, you've got things like the Heinkel, the 22nd, and you do have this MEBF 109. You can often get 1 to 2 cards from this, but you rarely get much more than that from it.
So no one was able to squeeze in War Machine into 2 of the 4 decks. Let's take a look at the bans and see which one of those gets through to play. So Vinny is going to lose that Soviet self-damage deck, and no one is going to lose the same here, Spooz. Is this just a question of the Soviet self-damage is kind of the most known quantity here? We know it's good. Just about everybody's bringing it. I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah, mostly. Also, it can just snowball really hard, and I think players are just, not really willing to deal with this deck. And on the other hand, no one is bringing, quite some aggressiveness with a lot of one-health units. And as Bubbles mentioned earlier in our first matchup, J-King versus Baron, you don't want to deal with all these sickles, winter warfares with units that have 1 health. So just get rid of it and you deal with the other decks.
And speaking of dealing with the other decks, here we go. Vinny versus Noen, our last quarterfinal of the day here at the 2nd OCC Ultimate.
Am I seeing double here, or are you seeing double here as well? We got the Dina,
the first thing I saw,
Signal,
double Signal Regiment. I thought,
and then the
is
double
same
Dina
picture?
to go with it. Yeah.
I was confused as well. So definitely keeping the Signal Regiment. What do you think? I mean, it is kind of dead, right?
You keep the Signal here if you're Noen. Now, it is very, very good. It is one of the strongest Japanese cards in the game, but you are a slower deck and you don't have any 1-drops. You do like to keep Dina and you do like to keep raiding because they're such insane value, but can you see yourself keeping all 3 of these cards? And Noen just says, yes, I don't need 1-drops. I'm going first. I'm going to have plenty of time. Vinny having an absolutely explosive hand here with 2 cavalry regiments, a Signal, and then some draw just to finish it off.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm happy with no one keeping the Signal Regiment here. Like,
I feel like it's
now he's not
greedy
having
to keep the
answers
3.
to that, right?
Yeah.
Cannot operate this. It's sure. It's very strong in the mirror because it's just constant damage to your opponent that he cannot really stop, other with a Raining Brigade maybe or double surprise attack. But now he just lost himself the potential to deal with these 15th cavalries. Good top deck here.
I'm very happy to see as well, Vinny going for the Signal over the Type 93. Sure, you do get sort of blown out a little bit by this raiding, but you can now play the Type 93 this turn for a lot of damage, and it also just makes you slightly less weak to cards like Shinano. Now, this Shinano could potentially be absolutely game swinging here.
I
Gonna
like
put
how
down
Vinny is
the
just holding back the
cavalry first.
expansion just to just increase the pressure. He also has 20
Look at
seconds.
that. Demolishes the board and you know, equalizes the health totals. And now Vinny is in a little bit more of a difficult scenario than they were before. It's not the worst position ever because no one is on 12 health, and Vinny's deck is more aggressive. So you might just better do this damage pretty much out of nowhere. But if no one's able to pretty much consistently take the front line, you know, you push up the front line with this raiding, you put down this KI 53, I believe it is. You essentially put Vinny on a 2-turn clock here.
Vinny has the Sendai in hand to deal with that Dragon Slayer.
I wonder if you go for the pin this turn, because if you go for the pin, that does allow you to use your credits elsewhere. You can put down these Yokosukas to the front line, and you can quickly develop a huge board.
Yeah, also Type 93 in hand allows you to trade the Dina into the raiding maybe, then push out 2 third Yokosukas there. Deciding to go for the Sendai instead.
You can still go for the Yokosuka trade, which is fairly reasonable, and then you do get this 1 damage to face. Shiden, if you find the time here with a bolster, Shiden could quickly finish the game. But that is the key thing here, finding time with your Noan.
Noan bouncing the
Considering that's the
Sendai.
half track. I almost
Yeah.
would prefer the KI-46 here.
It feels kind of slow. It only comes back as a 4-3 as well. So not as strong as it was before.
There's a lot of potential damage here. You've got the Type 93, you've got the Panzer 35T, and you can use a Yokosuka or 15th to enable it. We could see Noan's health total drop a seriously large amount this turn. However,
Yeah, tough
you do
situation.
potentially, if you don't trade into stuff like this artillery, you do run the risk of potentially being blown out on board and not being able to burn out the game. I'd like to see the draw come out this turn. I think it's important just in case you lose this front line again, which at the moment it's looking like there's a strong chance of that happening. I think get the draw out while it's consistent, see all your options.
That's some 2-3. Oh no, even with the Dina.
Puts him down to 4. That's a great card here for Noan, just doesn't quite have the credits to make it work. Now Noan, they can completely clear the front line, but they will then go down to 1 HP. Got 4 credits to trade away everything on board. And when you trade away this half track, you do clear space for the 24th. The question going through Noan's mind here is, do I clear the front line or do I kill this Type 93? Because you can kill the Type 93 in the back line and leave the Type 94 alive in the front line, and you take the same amount of damage this turn.
And looks like this is what Noan is going for here.
However, Vinny is now going to better draw.
Expect
And if you
expansion
find
first.
a Type 93, you find a Panzer 35T.
There
the
it
Panzer
is.
35T.
There's the 35T.
And Vinny is just able to burn out Noan.
Although no one had Signal Regiment on board. But yeah, the
I
early
mean,
pressure
this
with the
is-
15th Cavalry.
Keeping the Signal Regiment, it's great against control decks. It's great against decks that are going to struggle to heal up against it. But against a more aggressive deck, I rarely see you being able to outburn a traditional Jaguar deck here. And Vinny just utilizing these really aggressive tools. And I would have liked to see Noan Mulligan a little bit harder that game. I think, you know, the potential for stronger cards in the early game were in there. And I just think you had to be a little bit okay with getting rid of traditionally powerful cards.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I mean, if you have one drop in hand, maybe you can consider keeping it. But he had 0, right? He had the 3 drop. He had what was the raiding brigade, And it was really risky and really kind of greedy to keep the Sigma regiment there. And I think that just backfired. And yeah, better chances to do better. No one sticks with this Japan-US deck. And Winnie switched to combined arms now.
Now, if you can find a combined arms off the top, this could be a really, really fast hand here for Vinny. You've got the Hummer and you have the Jaeger regiment. This could be a lot of damage very, very quickly here. You just need to find that that combined arms.
So good for
Now-
Winnie. He already found time 94, so at least he's able to pin the big unit for one turn. Better would be if he finds a second one. I think that and Sendai is the only good deal or way to deal with these big units that
Yeah,
might
to
come
deal
there.
with Vinny's Hummers, and we see Noan having a relatively good hand. 15th Cavalry does create an interesting situation. I think I prefer the 15th Cav this turn because I think it allows you to ramp a little bit more comfortably. You can also allow Vinny to put some more resources onto the Hummer and not be aware of the surprise attack. But deciding, you know what, I want to keep the Blitzer. But I think Vinny could just potentially Heinzel this turn.
I think he's waiting for next turn, playing it on the Hummer now, and I think the plan is to push up the Jaeger regiment and then play the Henschel and give it +2/+2. Or you can also play it on a Penta too, right? He's
This
playing
is
it
the
on-
Bomber Henschel. This is the 1/3 Fury.
Oh, yeah, you're
So
right.
that's why I sort of wanted
The
to see
Arctic
it come
Simulator.
out.
Yeah.
See it come out that turn. Next turn, you can Jaeger and first buff it. It is weaker to fighters, but I think that's okay.
Yeah,
But
you're
we
absolutely correct.
see-
It would have been great to have that one on board. It deals with a lot of...
This 101 now with the Fury, buffing this
that's-
Hummer up very quickly, and this Rangers isn't enough anymore.
I play the Brit deck these days. Britain main and then the 101st, and then 101st on the Black Watch. Holy moly. On every unit with Fury, Fury is just so strong. And this one on the Hummer here, really, really doing work. But 5th Rangers plus 934, able to kill it.
It's just sad for knowing that you have to sacrifice the Type 94 when there are 1 health units like the Jaeger on board. Now, a couple options here. You can play the Ki-83 as well as trade into these frontline units fairly efficiently. Sure, the Jaeger survives in the front line, but I don't think that's the end of the world.
Comes the Dragon Slayer. 15th goes to the 101st. Same as the 5th Rangers. Oh, he's
No,
playing
gonna go
again.
for this single trade and hold back the 5th Rangers.
And there's the combined arms. Is there anything cool that Winnie can do with it? Do you ever push up the bomber?
I think... No need to push up the bomber, right?
Oh, it's just
'Cause
units on board, right?
Yeah,
it's not in the same line.
combined
Yeah,
arms
yeah.
is units on board. And yeah, just tuck down the 35T. And I'd like to see... Yeah, I'd like to see this just pressuring face as much as possible.
Oh, isn't that really good?
Yeah, that's
Good way
pretty.
to deal with the
That's
2-5.
pretty good. You can take the front line, but you die if you do that. If you put it down, take out the 2-5, trade into the front line with this 6-5, and push up the 5th Rangers. Then you can just kill the 5th Rangers easily, and then fury up this Hummer and attack with pretty much anything on board. So it's not enough to keep you in this game on its own.
Wait, you can just push the Dragon
You-
Slayer to the front line, can you?
You've got to kill this. I suppose it's that's an option. But then you do risk taking 2 damage per turn. I like this double surprise attack. In fact, maybe you just go single surprise attack and is risky. You get blown out by combined
that's
arms.
just 3 damage.
You get blown out by
Oh,
Blitzkrieg, and there you go, Vinny. Able to find lethal, and
I would
yeah,
have
no
loved
and
to
5
see
feeling the wrath
Vince
of
here.
combined arms.
Wow, really good top deck there. 2-0.
And notice we've seen 2 very aggressive German decks. We saw Baron's German Soviet deck, and now we see Vinny with the German combined arms deck. Both of them have performed pretty well. I think there's something to be said about just trying to go under your opponents and bring in these very hyper-aggressive decks. A lot of people aren't prepared for it, especially in this tournament setting.
Yeah,
And now
no one
Vinny
is
up
having a
2-0.
third option. Yeah, 2-0,
Yeah.
and no one is having another aggressive German deck.
It's
That is-
incredible how we have this effect from the players where they play quickly and they win 3-0 whenever we're about Spooz. It's the
It's our curse.
it's
We might not be invited to another tournament just because our
oh
series are
no,
always
then
so
yeah,
fast.
they're like we need some we need some long games. Let's not bring bubbles and Spooz.
So
We'll have to get Ollie. We'll have to get Ollie back because Ollie always got the long games, and I think Admirable as well.
Yeah.
Traditionally got the long games.
So
Oh,
Vinny's
see?
hand not really that great here. 2 Sonya's.
No, it'd be a lot better of a hand, against a much more board-focused deck. But no one's deck is relatively happy playing from the hand, at least in the early game, when there's not board pressure coming up from Vinny, which in this situation, there's just simply not. Spitfire is a nice find, but it can die so easily. You clear the board with this supply shortage, and then you just finish it off with an ASW patrol.
No supply shortage coming in this turn because there's not really any big threats on board. No one has the naval power in hand as well. Might just see ramp up again as well.
I really like Noan's position here. I think Noan's in a really, really strong position. And without these Empire Strikes or this HMS, this Bridaire deck is far more focused on board tempo because you don't have this burst later into the game that you could rely on in the past.
Yeah, also the second Piracy are not really helpful against Noan's deck here. Can maybe hit a Black Watch, but double supply shortage and the
This-
pin on the Spitfire.
This kills the Spitfire, this clears the board, and it puts Vinny in a fairly difficult situation. I think your only option is to draw and then just deploy a unit. See if you can find something better.
Ooh, not
Oh,
good
yeah, put
ones.
down. You saved the Swordfish for the cast buff, right?
Yep, probably.
I sort of feel like
Also,
I
Sonya's
don't
good synergy with the surprise attack. So Sonya makes absolute sense here.
you can sex him, but you could also just ASW patrol and go up to 10 credits next turn. Sure, you have a 50-50 chance of killing a unit that's already dead, but 10 credits. It's a lot of credits.
Absolutely, especially when your opponent is only at 6. There comes the bounce on the Saxon.
Vinny now starting to put a board down, and we have seen Noan use 2 of these board wipes already. However, I hate to sound like a broken clock here, but yeah, ASW patrol again, feeling very good this turn. And deciding not to go for the pin. Saying this isn't enough threat, I can tank the damage.
So no one only has 1 copy of supply shortage left in the deck now. Plus 1 monsoon rod.
Now, the difficult question for Vinny, do you try and pressure face for a bit of damage, or do you go for the card draw here? If you go for the card draw, you do have to overdraw 1 card. It just feels so bad going 4 face damage and having to float these credits. And putting down the Wellington without blitzing it. Not a terrible decision considering the scenario, especially because you've seen a fair amount of removal sort of come out from Known already with these supply shortages. I don't believe no one is running the mosquito either. Oh my
There's
God,
the
look at this
scenario that you
card
mentioned
draw.
earlier.
And it takes out the Wellington. That 3 credit slots, 3 cards, and it kills the unit. It's just, you know what it's like? All we need to do now is they discard 3 cards from your opponents, and it's just case yellow, but like souped up a bunch.
Vinny, now with the land lease here. Now he finds his early game. 1 close air support.
This is the classic situation whenever you play Brit Air, right? You find your early game late in the game, and you find your late game early in the game, or you only have air units, or you only have CAS. You never get that perfect mix of them all together.
Sometimes you get, but usually, yeah, it can be really annoying. But yeah, I think the Percy finally getting the value here that you want to get, getting rid of whether the Saxon. I mean, there are a lot of things you want to get rid of.
You do also have this Monty alongside this surprise attack. So I don't hate Piracy, kill the Blackwatch, and then that reduces the cost of the Monty and this surprise attack just to make it a little bit less painful. Obviously, at that point, you do have to have something to do with those credits. Otherwise, you are saving credits for nothing.
Oh, I like the idea of knowing here pinning the bomber, because this can be
Very
a
smart.
free trade with the Percy.
Yeah.
Now, Winnie has to operate the Lightning, which also has 2 operation costs.
I think potentially if you're Vinny here, you just go for this Monty play. It does feel bad that you have to eat all these credits, but if you kill this Blackwatch, you can then go for the Type 24 and go for a second removal piece because of the credits being reduced afterwards. Yeah, takes out the Blackwatch, identifies the path to take, and now just has to decide: do I take out the Sexton, do I take out the Honey, or do I take out this guy in the front line? And I'm leaning towards Sexton, but there is also a bit of fear with this Honey of no one just healing a ridiculous amount, Monty pinning you, and just Commonwealthing you down to essentially no HP. But yeah, just gonna go the sensible play, take out the Sexton.
Lancaster found by no one here. Not really helpful in that situation. So what are you looking for? Like maybe Monsoon Rod supply shortage?
Monty as well. The Churchill Archway here would be beautiful if only these things didn't fly. But unfortunately, they do. Obviously,
Ooh,
Ramp still drawing here for no one.
that's a
Wrath
good-
Lightning is a relatively strong card. However, it
Look how
does
much
allow
no one can do
Vinny-
in one turn. He can
Yeah,
draw,
it's-
he can bounce. 15
These-
credits is really a lot.
These ASW patrols are such fun cards to use.
Thinks about getting rid of the Sonya. 'Cause this can be really annoying with pin stuff.
I wouldn't hate bouncing the Wrath as well. Sure, you can get into a game of ping pong where you bounce your Wraths back and forth. But you've got 15 credit slots. Vinny has 10. It's a third of your turn and half of Vinny's. Finds a second Piracy.
A second Percy, yeah.
A second Piracy. That's a fourth Piracy. And now has to make an interesting sort of decision here. I think you do need to take out this opposing Wrath, but do you pressure face or do you kill one of these little honeys?
I think we're also kind of in a spot where, yeah, you don't want your opponent to get above 30.
Yeah, but if you go face, it resets them by 4, right? It takes them 4 damage away from 30. Now, no one can Commonwealth this turn, but can even check about around Ultra. We'll need to find a way of dealing with this fighter, but once you've dealt with the fighter, you can Wellington Lancaster in 1 turn to finish the job. So I wouldn't hate to see you go War Machine, you go Convoy, you go Commonwealth.
That might be exactly the line we're going to see here. Can even
It's not going for the Wellington.
Takes out the Rough Lightning to have 3 for Lancaster, maybe?
And yeah,
Where's-
takes out the Swordfish as well.
Removes all pincers now. Plays
I
a
mean,
little, yeah, a little bit.
This puts
safe.
Vinny in a very difficult spot without Empire Strikes available anymore for this Bradad. It's a far more difficult scenario. You almost have to play this second draw engine and just try and find something to stop this this bomber. You could potentially go sort of Gladiator, Albacore, and then go for like a naval supply run. Dragon Slayer, a very nice find here.
That's definitely stopping that Lancaster from going face here. There's supply shortage.
Now, you could supply shortage into the Lend-Lease. So play supply shortage and then play Lend-Lease. Draw 4 cards. You have a strong chance of finding a Monty.
With Lend-Lease, you mean Commonwealth?
Commonwealth.
Yeah.
Yeah, it draws 4
I
cards.
mean, it's the same. Yeah, it's just
essentially the
costing a little
same
bit more.
thing, you
Deals
know.
20 damage additionally. So.
Yeah, but other than the 20 damage and the 12 credit slots, it's essentially a Lend-Lease.
It's the same. Draws with the combo first. Finds
There's
the
the
Monty.
Monty.
It's not
I believe there's a
doing-
Monsoon Rot sitting somewhere in Noan's deck.
Yeah, 1 copy. Yeah, he just needs to find this, and he has a easy 5 credit board clear. 7 credit board clear.
How do you feel about an 8-8 in the front line?
I guess we're going to
Because I
see
mean,
that one.
personally, I feel quite good about an 8-8 in the front line. You've seen both Paraseas.
That sets up lethal
uses-
for next
yeah.
turn.
It's ridiculous that you can attack face for 8 and play the Commonwealth in the same turn. Like, I know some people find ramp a bit uninteresting, but I find these decks so enjoyable to play and so enjoyable to watch because it just gets a little bit ridiculous very quickly.
Yeah, it's also interesting how I underestimated the strength of ASW Patrol.
I think most of us did.
Yeah, it looked really weak, but in fact, it is such a strong and fun card to play because it opens up so much interesting strategies.
And it's so much value, and it's one of those cards where typically when you ramp, you're either ramping or you are developing something on the board or you're improving your hand state. There's not many times you're ramping and getting some value in the same card. Sure, you've got Milk Truck, but it's a 1/2 for free. That's not much value. This you get credits and you get a DFA out of it. So it's actually not as bad of a deal as it may seem on first sight.
So how can no one close out the game here? Not this turn, I guess. It just
mean,
goes to 18 credits now.
You
Soon you can
do
play
have
2
to-
Commonwealths.
You do have to be slightly careful of decking yourself here. And Vinny can actually put no one below the threshold for Commonwealth. So I'd almost like to see a Commonwealth this turn because you've used a lot of your healing. And we've seen the Ultra check already, so yeah. Put Vinny down to 6, and now you just have to find that 6 damage. You've got a lot of units left to do it. You've got a lot of gas left to do it. However, Vinny, not in the worst position. I think Vinny just needs to be really careful about leaving space open for Monty. So when their board gets pinned, they can still put down either an Albacore or a Sexton, depending on what is left in their hand. I'd almost like to see a Sexton here, and then just start buffing this board.
That's exactly what we're going to see here. Double close air support coming in. And yeah, no one needs to find the Monsoon Rod now. There are high chances they're drawing it because I think there are only 4,
Oh, not
5,
this
6 cards
turn,
left.
no. Yeah, but it's getting close. Now, the Churchill Arthray is really, really tempting. But this
you
does
bounce
just,
Piracy.
yeah. Piracy is such a bad card to bounce. I almost feel like this is the Monty turn. There's the monsoon rot. And that may have just put the nail in Vinny's coffin. If Vinny cannot find another source of pin off the top of their deck, then yeah, that's game. And no one able to take one of the matches, setting it to 2-1. However, Vinny does have another 2 opportunities to try with Bridair, but not going to be able to find a way to deal with these 8 attack units in the front line. And I was mildly concerned when we'd seen the Lancaster come out, we'd seen the Wellington come out. Is no one going to be able to find lethal? And they just about managed to find it. It was looking a little bit close, but this monsoon rot coming in just when they needed it. And Vinny probably wishing they had like an ultra or something there. You know,
Yeah, you can pin one of them, but the other one, there's no way Winnie is stopping the second one from attacking phase there.
It does feel bad though when you ultra like a 6k card, but you're up against ramp, so your 3 credits was more costly than there's like 6 credits.
Well, yeah, we finally have a series here. Not another 3-0. Known taking game number 3 with this, yeah, pretty cool Brit US ramp deck.
And now we've got Bridair either against this Japan mid-range deck, which I think is an okay matchup. There are some nice fighters to block bombers. You've got some good early game, especially with the ramp, and you do have some good removal tools to deal with this backline with like the Shinano. But then you also have this Germany deck in the back pocket, which I think can really go 50-50 if you're lucky. But these Stonias and all these ways of instantly killing units, no matter how big they are. Look at this hand here for Vinny.
He
2
found the close air
casters and-
supports, but he's only having Japanese air units. Oh, man.
Known as well, having a relatively good hand here with double War Machine as well as Aichi and Type Money 4. Yeah, these scouting parties are a little bit dead in this matchup, but there's a good chance you can cycle at some point. And Vinny still not finding a single British air unit.
There are like 5,000 in the deck, but not a single one being found.
Yeah, I mean, the Japanese Air Force, they're here and they won't go away.
So what do you do if you're Noen? Do you play the Aichi or do you push? I don't know, it makes no sense to push 24s to the front line. Tough decision here, maybe?
I think there's logic to Aichi and ramp, but I also am not particularly confident in that line. You do also get blown out by any removal pieces, and since you've seen Vinny just hitting face for free and not developing their board, there's a good chance they have some removal pieces.
No one decides to go white here, have as much units on board as possible.
Still, Vinny not finding this British air unit. I'm curious if they'll go for the Sincerely Yours this turn. No, gonna take out this this Type 94, protecting their board. And I assume you just go face for 2. I don't feel like there's too much to be gained from giving Noen an additional draw. You give Noen the card sooner, and you prevent Noen from spending the credit. Now Noen has to spend credits moving these up. And this is managing to look not bad here for Vinny, even though half your hand is dead. But Vinny finds a single Swordfish, a Gladiator, even an Albacore, and this hand goes from interesting to just dominating this game and running away with it.
Let's see what the top deck is here for Winnie. Is it finally a Brit?
Oh,
no!
no!
It's another close air support.
Oh, that is tragic.
Oh
Truly tragic.
my god. Gets rid of the Aichi. Clears as much units as possible and still waits for the first Brit air unit to arrive. This almost looks like he's playing Japan air.
This type 93 could actually be really huge this turn for Noan. It allows you to do so much more damage to Vinny's backline than Vinny had planned for.
No one drawing first. He wants to get. It's an IG. There comes the type
And now look at
93.
this. And with the lack of AoE in Vinny's deck, this is starting to look really bad for Vinny, just not finding these British air units. An Albacore could be very nice, however, it's still potentially just not enough.
And with only 2 units on board, also the 3 close air supports provide not that much value now. There's the first Brit air unit, but a
There's
really
the-
expensive one.
The
And the
fourth close
fourth.
air support as well.
Just imagine you find 4 close air support before you find your first Brit air unit.
It's so unfortunate. This is how Brit Air feels when I play it.
Yeah, same for me. Same for me. It's going to... Yeah, if he does this, he needs to...
I mean, there's not
No,
too
there's
much
not.
to be gained from doing 2 damage to face. And Noan's hand may be a lot smaller, but you have 4 potential draw cards on the board.
Oh, there's the
There's
first!
Albacore. Well, you got the Wrath, you know.
You can also go Albacore, Type 93, and just play your close air supports.
I just want you to look at this board for a moment, Spooz.
Mhm.
And you know what? Chat, do this as well. Look at this board for a moment, and then close your eyes, and just imagine you're Vinny, and you're about to rip an Empire Strikes off the top. That's, you know,
The good old times.
that's the flashback I get to Brit Air. And now you look at this board with this sort of newer version of Brit Air, and you just feel like there's not a good out for you. There's too many units to deal with. I mean, look at this. Vinny trying his absolute hardest to slow down this board, but there's just so many units.
So what can 4... I mean, 4 close air supports on the Lightning and on the IG? That's a lot of damage.
That is a lot of damage.
And it's even enough credits. So the Albacore might be killed, but then there's 4 close air support. That is like 8 plus 6 is
Oh.
14.
But is no one going to pin? Is no one going to have the presence of mind, if you will?
No?
No. Not identifying this big threat in the air.
The question is, are you going for it if you win it? Do you set your
Oh,
opponent
you've
to 1?
Got to go for it. You have to go for it. You've got Wellington in the deck. Sometimes you just got to roll. What else are you going to do?
Yeah, sure. He's not getting away with trading 2 units away there.
Yeah.
That's not how he's winning the game.
All in.
Oh.
I want to see all in. I mean, you could potentially go like double cast, and then you can go for like Type 94 stuff. But I think all in is far more interesting.
Yeah, the Wellington next turn would not be lethal, because it would be 10 credits to operate. Maybe...
You can Type 94.
Yeah, you can
to-
type 9
to
surprise
reduce
attack.
the-
Yeah. There he goes. The all-in move. I mean, kind of. You can only play 3 close air supports now. Oh, he's going for the trades.
And then what? Going face for 5? No, trying to protect the units.
Ooh, okay.
I'd be a lot closer to the edge of my... Oh, Shenano.
Ooh.
Make sure you deploy as many units as you're going to want to this turn first. But this Shenano could tear Vinny's board asunder. And no, I'm just trying to decide, do I want to play another 24th? I think you just go for it now. And here it goes.
Ooh, everything's still alive?
But for how long?
Oh, yeah, but for 2 seconds, I guess.
Yeah, not for very long at all.
Oh, and the half track. I don't know. I would have loved to see no one being at 1 here and then just hope for the Wellington top deck. Any other out? No, only the Wellington. So maybe that's a little bit too much of a gamble, I guess.
Yeah, but sometimes you've got to roll the dice. If he finds the Wellington now, it's gonna be like
Yeah, that would
perfect.
be really sad.
It'd be sad for Vinny. It'd be
Yeah.
fun for the
definitely.
rest of us.
Oh! No
There
way!
it is, rubbing
No
it in Vinny's
way.
face. The
Oh
Wellington.
my god.
Oh no.
I mean, it probably was the right decision to
That
not
is
do it, but that
mean.
I think I would not sleep 2 nights after this happening.
Someone at 1939 offices like / give Wellington.
Give Wellington top deck.
Oh no. Oh.
Oh man.
I mean, credit where credit's due. Vinny is still fighting. They're not going down without a scrap. I just think they are still going down, at least in this match. You know, they still have another attempt.
Against the pincer deck. So we're going to see that one
Against
as
the
well,
pincer.
very likely.
I
I
mean,
mean,
You've
it's still
got
winning.
so many ways of killing high HP units. But if no one can put down these units and you don't have an answer to them, you're just going to get steamrolled.
Yeah, absolutely. Astrakhan can be so insane.
And even if you don't find the Astrakhan, stuff like a turn 1 autocannon is scary. That puts fear into my heart. A 3/3 that costs 1 to operate and is dealing additional burn. And there we go. Vinny scooping it up, and 2-2 going to the full best of 5. We're going to have Bridair against, like you say, this Germany pincer deck.
Sometimes I
think the
feel like
question-
our games are scripted. Like how is he top decking the Wellington on turn 10 when he could
It's
have
just
had
like-
lethal there?
The opponents on your streams where there's the actors.
Oh man, so
Now, I think the question for this next matchup isn't who high rolls, is who low rolls.
Oh, and no one has the war production
Oh.
hand.
But look
And
at this hand here
Astrakhan.
from Vinny. Look at this
Both
hand here from
players.
Vinny as well.
Both play with a really good hand here.
Yeah, and it's gonna be really interesting here. We see this turn 1 Jaeger Astrakhan.
Yeah, that
And
opens up a
yes-
turn 2 22nd and both units in the front line.
Oh, but this KI-51 with a Type 94 off the top now. Unfortunately, though,
Not really help, right?
un-
You need 3 credits. To
you
do
need
this.
3 credits. You do have.
But
the
he has an
albacore
albacore as well.
I think I like putting down a KI-51 this turn because you have plenty of them to use. I think it's reasonable to put down a bomber this turn. You could put down the Type 94, but I think this is a slightly safer route.
Another pincer unit here, the Stuxbury Schürzen.
However, no one is going to need to use these credits to trade because their Jaeger is going to be removed. Is there a world in which you just albacore this turn? No, I think that's too greedy. I'm greeding out a little bit here. I think you trade away and just like drop a swordfish.
Yeah. Keep the Type 94 as a surprise, maybe. So your opponent's
Yeah,
overextending
the
into the Astrakhan.
surprise attack.
Is he going for
Oh, there's
the...
so many good cards here for Noan, but just not quite the credits to use them all.
raid and push up 22nd?
I mean,
Ooh, and another pincer one.
just yeah, you can albacore or you can Type 94 and just destroy the Astrakhan, remove it.
Sonya doing work here. Sonya, whenever it attacks a pinned unit, that unit is being destroyed. Bye-bye Astrakhan. And there's the next one.
However, Marder and 22nd in the front line. You can drop a Marder. You can even drop a Jaeger if you want and buff the 22nd just to get additional units on the board. There could be a lot of draw here for Noan, and while each card is probably going to give you less value than a bomber would, you're gonna have so many cards just because of this Marder draw. You also have to be thinking, can I get away with Astrakhan? If they don't have any more answers to Astrakhan, maybe I just Astrakhan Jaeger it.
That's what we're going to see here.
Yeah, and you have to play
Another-
the Jaeger straight away to get it out of range of these removal pieces, such as this air superiority.
We need finding all these close air supports again.
But this 6th air landing could just decimate Vinny's board soon. You can put down an albacore and a swordfish this turn. Gonna go for the Cass instead, which does turn off the 6th air the 6th air landing brigade. I don't hate it. And yeah, you do really need to trade here because you want to be trading on your turn. You don't want no one to be taking these trades because when no one takes trades, they can do things like Marder, they can do things like Nashub, they can do things like the BFG. And there's a lot of...
The problem with playing the close air support, now these bombers are not dealing 3 damage when the air landing is on board.
Yeah, it's...
Kind of... But it
It's-
still
it's-
has ways with the air superiority. Goes to 4.
It's just, it is one of the downsides to using Cass that does happen. And now no one is able to play the first and trade into that albacore because you do get the +1/+1 before you attack.
Yeah, that makes the 101st so strong. The ability that it
yeah.
get +1/+1 before it attacks.
It's sort of like the American Hellcat fighter, but without being the American Hellcat. It's the good side of that without being the bad side of that.
Yeah, it also has a 2/5 body, which is kind of strong for a 3-drop.
I mean, a 3-drop Volksgrenadier, which is like one of the best statted 3-drops in that area. Obviously, you got USA ones with ridiculous stats, but they have ridiculous operation costs. This has 1 less attack and 1 less defense than the Volksgrenadier, but it has like one of the strongest pincer abilities in the game at the moment.
Yeah. Absolutely. So what is Winnie looking for here? Not
Wait.
able to kill the Scherzen in the front line?
A unit with 1 attack actually isn't that bad because it does mean you can 6th air landing it. However, this is going to get really ridiculous. We've got 2 Panzer Grenadiers in hand. I want to see war production. I'm not even fussed about Marder. I want to see double Panzer Grenadier. I want to see this buff. This is gonna... Oh no! Look at this board! Oh... this is...
This just became from handleable to terrible in like 2
Oh,
cards.
Yeah, this just became so much worse for Vinny. They do find the Monty to buy some time, but that's all you're doing. You're buying time because with this board, you're gonna need more than time. And I'd like to point out that's a 5/3 with ambush, so you're gonna need to trade 2 units into that 5/3 of ambush.
It's ridiculous. I don't see how Winnie can deal with this board, to be honest.
I mean, the air landing, great for trading. The Gladiator, now a 3/3, great for trading. The issue is there's a 5/3 and a 4/7, both with ambush in the front line. And, you know, if you're no one here, you've still got a Marder. I think you save the Marder to generate more draw. I think you potentially just pass back the turn this turn. You could Jaeger to get the unit down, but you're not fussed about that pincer.
All of these units have pincer effect. Just needs the 10
You know,
credits.
we
10 credit order
need-
now.
Yeah, we need to start skipping Vinny's turns with
What is
Protect
that
the
thing?
Pocket, I believe it is.
Protect the pocket, yeah, correct.
Now, Vinny, gonna have to start trading away with these absolute beefcakes here that no one has.
How can he ever do this?
You have to. Oh, I don't even know.
Gladiator into Schützen? Oh my
Well,
god.
and then
You also need to sort out which unit has the pincer with which other unit, so
yeah. He's just like that one. It's like connecting, connect the dots, the game that kids play, like trying to work out which ones go where. And you can't trade these ambush units are surviving in the front line. And now with Marder and 22nd, there's going to be a lot of card draw. And you can take out that air landing.
which unit would you do it? I mean, yeah, it has to
Or
be the one on
7.
first, right?
Yeah, you've got to
The
go
other
with
one
the,
would
the
die.
101. You can then trade afterwards with the other one. But a Panzer 35T
Ooh, that
means
allows
the
you to kill
perfect
the Dragon Slayer.
There's another one. I think you just trade, push 2 units up to the front line. Don't worry about the card draw right now. You need stats in the front line.
I'm a little bit afraid of whatever here. I mean,
think
maybe
this is a
protecting the
reasonable
Marder
play.
mostly, like, right?
Yeah, you're protecting the Marder. You're safe to any sort of burst damage, but there's no way you're getting raced here. Sexton would normally be an absolutely insane card, but it's just not really it's not really enough. And it's really starting to look like Noan has gone from a 2-0 to a 2-3 here, swinging back this series. And Vinny just unable to find what they need with Bridair, not able to get that explosive tempo start. And without these swordfishes coming out of the HMS Illustrious and without the AoE to clear the board, you're just not able to keep up if you don't have these high explosive starts that Bridair is known for.
Yep.
Oh.
Oh my. Oh, these pins
Oh
are-
no! So you can trade the Marder, draw another 2 cards. Look at the card draw,
Oh man, there's so much going on
and
here.
then
Oh
Vinny
my
scoops it
God.
up. No one winning
Turn it
very entertainingly on that pincer deck, drawing like half their deck or something, and that is our final game for day 1.
So much for that. The curse of the casters you two had going on where, oh yeah, when we show up, it's 3-0 and people get knocked right around. We thought it might happen, but no one coming back with a huge reverse sweep. Bubbles, you always talk about banning Brits. Is it just that this Brit air deck is not quite as consistent as it once was?
I think it would be a lot more of a comfortable position here if you were playing against slower decks. When there's these high tempo decks on the board and you can't keep up because you haven't got the combinations you need, then you are going to fall behind. And in the past, you just blitzed out bombers. You had the, obviously, you still have the Wellington, but you had Wellington along with HMS for blitz bombers with Cass. And you had obviously this huge AoE and Empire Strikes to reset this tempo if you lost the early game tempo. You also had shadowing and stuff to help you buy time and burst down face. But the slower decks, which are around, a lot of them are discard. And discard has traditionally been quite good against Britair. Not as good now that supply shortage is out the way and using Japan instead. But even with this healing and this way of disrupting hand, it's still relatively good against you. And I think one of the reasons Bridair feels like it falls behind on tempo so much at the moment is, yes, you don't have anywhere of swinging tempo, and yes, you have high tempo units, but you need them in combinations. And this is where something like Jagro or Heinz are different. Generally, so long as you're hitting your 1-drops and your 2-drops, you're relatively happy. Bridair, you need specific 1-drops with specific buffs, with specific 2-drops. And this is one of the things where the deck often falls short is you don't just need your cards, you need your cards in combination with each other. Whereas Jagro, so long as you're not getting 4 expansions in your opener, you're generally pretty happy.
And the lack of, AoE to kind of control things and slow your opponent down just allows them to kind of run you over if you don't draw those proper cards. So very curious to see if we'll, in the future have somebody else attempt Brit Air again, or if after this inability to close out the series that it gets kind of put away for a little bit to take a bit of a breather.
It'll come back. It always does.
It always does. On the other side of things, Spooz, did we expect No Win's pincer deck to operate just as bananas as it did, or was it a question of, again, that matchup where Brit Air couldn't quite slow it down, so it got to really pull off the combos exactly how it would like?
I mean, honestly, Winnie had a really good starting hand in the 5th match here. I expected Known to have a hard time, but this double Panzer Grenadier turn where he just buffed all his units by +2/+2, that just gave him so much value there, made it so hard for Winnie with dealing all of this stuff, just as Bubbles said. You don't have access to Empire Strikes, so you can have 5,000 bombers in hand. They're not doing anything because they no longer have blitz. Your opponent can easily trade them out. You cannot remove their units, and then you just lose. It's as easy as that.
Well, we will see more Noen tomorrow. We'll potentially see this pincer deck again. Let's bring up the bracket and show you where we left off today and where we're going to pick things up tomorrow here. So we have Baron von Glower defeating the 2-time defending world champ J King 3-0. Baron will be taking on Tang Tang in our first semifinal. Tang Tang defeating Head 3-1. Azzy going on to the semis as Ziyang had to drop and will be going up against Noen, who we just saw reverse sweep Vinny 3-2. So keep in mind, tomorrow we are going to have the semifinals, the bronze match, and the grand finals. $3,000 on the line. Going to be a huge day tomorrow. Before we get there, though, Bubbles, anything specific, any matchup, any deck in particular you're looking forward to seeing tomorrow?
There's 2 decks, or maybe 3 decks which come to mind, but 2 of them are fairly similar. The Germany-Soviet decks, obviously Noen's Pincer one and Baron's sort of more aggressive all-in one. So that I'm bundling those as one style of deck. And then I really want to see more of this unit list from Baron. We saw a really entertaining match. We were trying to figure out all the lines and, trying to figure out which armaments has he got? Has he got lethal here? How does this match up against certain things? And how does Jaking need to try and answer this? I just think, sure, these decks can be frustrating to play against as an individual, but to watch them in a competitive scene played by high-level people against high-level people and how these players react to these things in such a vast array of ways different to how we would. I personally think that's super interesting. I find it super entertaining. And I hope people that find the deck frustrating are able to put that frustration aside and appreciate what's going on in this match. And sure, when you match up against it on ladder, go to the KARDS Discord, write your complaints. I'm fully with you on that. But for the sake of the competitive tournament, just put your worries aside, sit back, and enjoy how these high-skill players, have a battle of chess almost.
But to play off of that, Bubbles, when I'm in a scenario where I'm facing a deck that's really frustrating or something that's running over me every time I match up with them on ladder, I love going in and seeing a tournament or a high-level matchup or a YouTube video with a quality player playing that deck so I can understand the ins and the outs of how to go up against it. So hopefully our audience takes a thing or two away about how to deal with some of these shenanigans on ladder, but I can definitely empathize with them being a little bit frustrating to face off against. Spooz, you talked about coming into today, there's a lot of variety of decks that we saw, and then we saw a variety of decks maybe perform better than we expected. Anything specific on your end that either a highlight from today or something you're looking to see more of tomorrow as we get into the semis and the finals?
I mean, first of all, I want to mention that I'm pretty happy that I think almost every discard deck lost today, and discard did not perform as well as we're used to on ladder. So not everybody's just copying discard decks because they're the best decks right now. So first of all, I'm happy about this, but I'm also happy about just seeing stuff like Baron's Britain unitless deck winning, seeing the pincer deck from Noen here, just where so much stuff is going on, so much effects, units are getting buffed, you get draw, you do this, you get ambush as well. It's very entertaining, and I think it's really interesting to watch for the audience and also for us, and it's really fun to cast those games, and I can't wait to see more of this tomorrow, to be honest.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in today for our day 1 of the 2nd ever OCC Ultimate. Same cards time, same cards channel tomorrow, where we will crown a grand champion.